Honorable Zungulu.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. It is not enough to condemn the violence against African nationals as well as the gender-based violence and then fold our arms. The time has come for us to take responsibility by formulating legislation to deal with these problems permanently. There is a foreign hand in the African-to-African violence. The intention is to have South Africa isolated from the rest of the continent. This situation is made worse by the climate of South Africans being dominated in their own informal sector, also known as the microeconomy. South Africans must be the dominant players in the economy of their own country. The microeconomy must be the signature of proudly South African, and thus must be ring-fenced for local participation. All foreign nationals must be considered for work in SA on a scarce and critical skills basis. It makes no sense for a person to be a waiter or a driver, whereas there are tons of South Africans who can do that job. On the gender-based violence, we've had enough summits, marches, pickets, as well as the 16 days of activism. It is 21 years old, and the situation is getting worse as we have a gender-based violence rate that is 5 times higher than the global average. All medical centers, including clinics, must be accredited by SABC centers where gender-based violence cases can be reported. Each police station must have officers that are specifically for gender-based violence cases. They must process, collect evidence, and investigate gender-based violence cases. And these cases must be prioritized for swift prosecution. We need to learn from Malawi and Tanzania, which had a similar issue, but for them it was for the killing of people living with albinism. Both countries have a death penalty for such matters as a commitment that they have got a zero tolerance for those crimes. We need a death penalty for gender-based violence for repeat offenders. These are unrepentant people who have shown they have no regard for human life. The death penalty must be only for repeat offenders, and after High Court has handed the sentence, it must go on automatic review to be heard by the full bench of the Supreme Court of Appeal, and a senior counsel must be provided by the state. We can't keep having outrage and issue condolences because of criminals who rape and kill our sisters. If you kill people for a living, you must be deemed to have revoked your right to life. The state must not be soft and be a boyfriend to these animals, because odadewethu bayaphela. What is more cruel is that the parents of Karabo, Courtney, will be paying food, clothes, and security and comfort for these killers. Let us listen to the women who come to Parliament to protest on a yearly basis, saying enough is enough, it is not enough, we need tougher laws. Thank you.
Honorable Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, we can never justify the violence and criminality that we've seen in our country in the past few weeks. The only thing we can do is to condemn it. And as South Africans, we must be frank and honest. We must call a spade a spade. It is shameful what happened. Violence has taken hold of our country. And some of this violence seems to be orchestrated to embarrass us and distract South Africa from the real task, building a more just and inclusive society. Violence, be it gender violence, gang violence, xenophobia violence, must be condemned. Unless South Africans stand up, good South Africans stand up and say enough is enough, this violence will continue with us. And as South Africans, we must remember that we are African, that we are not an island, that we are part of the continent, and the continent is part of us. But, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, we must stop this useless ideological debates and focus on the reality, and that is how to grow our economy and to create jobs. We must leave the outdated ideological debates and focus on the reality. Our people cannot eat ideology. The problems of our people knows no political affiliation. When you are poor, when you are homeless, when you are landless, it does not matter what political party you belong to. The solution is to create more opportunities for all our people, to create an enabling environment for the private sector also to create jobs. And it's only when our people see their opportunities, when our people see that government is enforcing the laws, that we are leveling the playing field, that this useless violence will stop. At the same time, we also see that South Africa has signed the free trade agreement with Africa. And in future, it will not only be goods and services that will be moving, but also people will be moving across our borders. So South Africans must be empowered with the right tools, with the right attitude and the right approach to take advantage of the open trade with Africa. And we must welcome our brothers and sisters, and we must create jobs for all of us and welcome our brothers and sisters to our country. I thank you.
Thank you. Honorable SABC.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, the National Freedom Party condemns the violent acts taking place within our country. As we speak right now, many South Africans and foreigners lay victim to violence. Many innocent citizens and non-citizens are being attacked or caught in the violent crossfire. The violent encounters between citizens and non-citizens, it is not new. The friction between the two have been brewing in our informal settlements. The increase of femicide, xenophobic attacks and protest actions tell us that we are in a crisis, and as leaders, we need to take action to protect each South African citizen as well as foreigners seeking a better future. We know that there are approximately 2.5 million migrants in the country seeking protection and jobs, two factors that we are unable to provide. We know the figures, a 29% unemployment rate, that is more than 6.6 million people without a job. 30% of South Africans have no access to running water, 13% live in informal dwellings. These are millions of people who do not have access to decent living. The fear and paranoia among citizens is increasing due to uncertainty of their future. Honorable Deputy Speaker, as the National Freedom Party will not ignore the complaints listed by South Africans. We are constantly hearing about foreign nationals selling drugs to our kids, importation of fake goods, and the idea that foreigners occupy jobs meant for citizens. Informal settlements are dominated by foreign-owned businesses, evidently making it difficult for citizens to infiltrate the market. The need for mechanisms to assist in social cohesion should be the focus in combating violence between foreign nationals and citizens. Social cohesion influences economic and social development, and nurturing a more cohesive society is an important policy goal in itself for our country. Honorable Deputy Speaker, the reality is South African women feel unsafe in their own country. Walking in your area of residence without fear of being marked or attacked by a criminal is a basic freedom that everyone should enjoy. Gender-based violence has reached undeniable alarming levels in South Africa. In order to ensure alleged offenders are brought to justice, the government must also ensure that gender-based violence is taken seriously at every level of the justice system, including by challenging discriminatory stereotypes about victims and survivors. A woman is murdered every 3 hours in South Africa, and more than 40,000 rapes are reported every year. Police data shows.
Thank you. Honorable Gallo.
Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. The recent incidents of violence and criminality in the country, including those affecting foreign nationals, are a cause for concern. In the wake of reported cases of xenophobia in 2008, we were outraged as a nation by the spread of violence targeted at foreign nationals. However, our outrage had a short span as everything went back to normalcy. 11 years later, we are reeling from the events of 2008 without any cure. This debate, therefore, must be context-based. The violence against foreign nationals must be condemned. Part of this condemnation must include pressurizing this government to leverage the socio-economic conditions of our people. We have taken note that this government has introduced the Border Management Authority Bill, but this bill, honorable members, deals with peripheral matters such as the handling of filing applications, risk systems, and the proper pricing of important goods. True to form, the bill is not interested in the movement of persons in and out of the country. The Khampepe Commission of Inquiry made damning findings against the electoral environment under which the elections in Zimbabwe in 2002 were held. Our government, for more than 12 years, kept the report under wraps. We are seeing, in part, the manifestation of all these indecisions today. The AU is partly to blame as well because it has allowed despots to govern without accountability. It was only in 2002 that the AU Constitutive Act introduced the non-indifference clause, allowing nations to interfere in other states rocked by war crimes, abuse of human rights, and so on. Africa has to improve the conditions of her people, to curb unwarranted migration. The scarce resources the continent has must be to the benefit of her people. Africa unite against corrupt, lumpen politicians. It can't be correct, Honorable Deputy Speaker, that the leaders here will have their slices of bread buttered both sides, while the people are starving to death.
Honorable the Court.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Comrades, it's important that we must say this afternoon to each other. Nation states are not an accident of history. Nation states were adopted by the international community in order to regulate the relations between differing peoples and countries. Shortly after the OAU was formed, it also adopted a position on this nation state. It said that we will not change the boundaries inherited from the colonial period, because to try and change those boundaries would have unleashed fresh conflicts around the world, in fact, in our continent. So we are a nation state. Whether we like it or not, South Africa is a nation state. And the citizens of this country are the very first responsibility of the government of this country. Therefore, it cannot be that we can run the affairs of our nation without managing relations between us and other countries. Citizens of this country have got documents. If they leave this country, we give them the passports. They can identify themselves. When they get there, they can say why they are there. If the countries in which they go do not need them, they say to them, please, we have enough labor, you can go back to your country. That right, then we do that. That right we also have in relation to other countries. But our government cannot allow for people to come from anywhere and everywhere and come into this country without documentation, without indicating why they are here, without indicating where they are going to live, without saying how much money they have to spend for that period. We cannot do that because we are not also allowed to do that in other countries. So that is the first problem, is if our country is not going to look after this country and manage entrance at the borders and so on, we will be in difficulties. Now, today I had thought that before we have this debate, we would ask the government to tell us how many people come from this country who are here without documents. How many people come from that country without proper registration? How many are here as refugees, in other words, running from conflict? And how many are here because they have come to sell drugs? How many are here? All of those things, this government must know. Because if we don't have that, we will say everything that's happening is xenophobia.
Yes.
When it is not.
Relokot na go ga go hedile ra. Ska dula hatsi e hedile na go ya ga. E hedile ra.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Nyonso.
Deputy Speaker, Comrade Deputy President, let me start by quoting Section 10H of the PAC Disciplinary Code that reads that we should develop and show a true respect for African womanhood and demonstrate it in practice the theory of sexual equality with respect to men and women. I mention this to reflect that the PAC saw these social challenges way back since its inception in the 50s, and I stand before you to amplify this clarion call for African men and women to go back to their roots, cultural values and morals. Talking to the topic in hand, the PAC is of the belief that for as long as we want to resolve the symptoms of the violence we see perpetuated by men and women against each other, the children, and the thuggery we see with the looting of shops disguised as xenophobia, we'll never get to the root cause of this problem. These murderers, rapists, and thieves are a reflection of the deep-rooted societal challenges we harbor as a people. These are not aliens from somewhere outside our societal boundaries, but instead these are our kids, sisters, brothers, neighbors, and this means we are part of the problem. PAC would like to take this opportunity and appeal to the conscience of all Africans from all walks of life, be it media, governments, governmental and non-governmental organizations, faith-based organizations, to take a pause and relook at ourselves with the intention to answer this difficult question before us. The curriculum in our schools seems not to be talking to our African moral values that are the foundation of the spirit of humanity. As African people, we know who and what is being an African. Hence, we pronounce here today that no African can be a foreigner in Africa. A crime is a crime, and it has no surname, nationality, race, or citizenship. Our law enforcement, especially the intelligence services, to play its part in dealing with the influx of drugs, guns from other countries, be it from Russia, Colombia, Kenya, or Nigeria. The same goes with local dealers and those who take the law into their own hands in claiming to be fixing our problems. The PAC calls for more Africanized curriculum in our schools so we can teach young girls and boys to coexist together with respect and in peace. We call for government to go harsh on elements of criminality among our fellow African brothers and sisters, and that perpetuated by international drug cartels. I thank you.
Thank you, Latif. Honorable Hendricks.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, Honorable Deputy President, we all know Mashi Chaba, who is a presenter and host on the Drive Show on SAFM. It is a birthday today, and yesterday she remembered the hospitality of Zambia, and today she's taking the day off to celebrate that hospitality. She left South Africa as a 14-year-old with her mother to Zambia, who was an MK operative. She fondly remembers her time in Zambia and how she was treated as a daughter by the neighborhood and was certainly not referred to as a foreign national. Last week, I attended the book launch by Professor Kwesi Kwapra and Dr. Guma. The book launch was about people like Mashi Chaba, who was well treated in several African countries they fled to during the anti-apartheid struggle. The book tells how they were all called brothers, honorable sisters, honorable daughters. Every page of the 300 pages tells the story of hospitality across so many countries. I was very touched when the sister talked about the revolutionary ideas of President Nkrumah. Now is the time to reflect on the Bureau of African Affairs and call for United States of Africa, hatched in London as early as 1940. I don't know if there's anyone around. Robert Sobukwe, while he was a member of the ANC, gave leadership when he argued that Africa is doomed even while it is getting uhuru as small states, and they will be swallowed up. The struggle is to have United States of Africa. We don't hear about United States of Africa today, and we have thrown so many values of Ubuntu in the waste paper basket. It's a shame that we call people like Mashi Chaba, if she was from another African country, a foreign national, and not a beloved daughter, mother, and sister. The ideas of Nkrumah are the ideas I was hoping to hear today, and I did hear from the sister about some of those ideas. I don't want the Sixth Parliament to be the last outpost of colonialism in South Africa. There needs to be a new narrative which I don't hear from those that count in this particular house. We don't hear it loudly. What we are hearing is a plot against those of us who enjoy our freedom because of our hospitality given to our comrades and their daughters like Mashi Chaba. The Nkrumah honorable members in this house, we must give leadership.
Thank you. Honorable Sengwa.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, at the outset, maybe one must pay tribute to Jabu Baloyi, who in Pretoria was killed for stopping the sale of drugs. Because we must deal with root cause. Because we must not run away from the fact that there are borders, you know. Because we can't pretend as though there are no borders. The borders are there. Borders need to be managed, and people need to be documented. The response to the shortcomings at Home Affairs with the Defense Force and the police should not trigger our people into violence. Government must take responsibility for the shortcomings in the system which have bred this particular reality. And so the plea is, let us not kill people. No matter how wrong the things are, but we cannot, South Africans, kill people. Now, you've got people then who are saying Sunday's gathering was a rally. It was never a rally. If it was, as an IFP member in good standing, I would have been there, if it was an IFP rally. It was a political rally, but it was a necessary discussion that South Africa needs to have to raise the consciousness of our people about the dangers of the action they are pursuing. Because we will end up thinking that through the violence we have fixed the problem, and would not have actually done so. What we need to admit in this house is that there are shortcomings at Home Affairs. What we need to admit in this house is that there is a failure to maintain and secure our borders. What we need to admit in this House is that the police have lost the war on drugs, they've lost the war on criminality, and people, rightly or wrongly, are now taking the law into their own hands because the system is failing them. And so it will be easy for us to scratch the surface, but it cannot be that human trafficking is normalized because we've not secured our borders. You go to Wavuma and so on, you just literally jump over the fence and there's nobody there. And so we must not misplace the idea that we are all Africans with lawlessness. Nobody is saying Africans should not be in South Africa, but what we are saying is that we need to be responsible about the movement of people so that consequence management can become part and parcel of law enforcement. That has not happened. We need to know who are the refugees, we need to know who are the asylum seekers, so that when crime happens, we know where to track them. Now, in the current situation, we are unable to do so. That is the call to leadership. But for us to deal with these hard truths, let's create a conducive and enabling environment which is peaceful and interact with African governments on the best possible way to make sure that Africans who are in South Africa are properly registered. That is the vacuum, because if we don't deal with that, year in and year out, we're going to have this particular challenge. So, Honorable Deputy Speaker, we condemn the violence. None of us support the violence. But our condemnation of violence should not be us negating our fundamental responsibility of making sure that we do the right things in this country. So I challenge the government to step up to the plate and not run away from its responsibilities. Kodwa mase kufika indaba enzodla impela siyakhuza ukuthi angabi khona umuntu obulala umuntu ngoba itshena ukuthi lokho kuyisixazululo. Ayisithi isixazululo ekulaleni abantu kodwa isixazululo sekuthena uhulumeni akenza umsebenzi wakhe ngaphandle kokunyanyalada. I thank you.
Honorable King.
Deputy Speaker, between 28 and 30% of adult men reported having raped a woman. Most men who rape do so for the first time as teenagers. 55 rape complaints against police officers were investigated between April to September 2018. Out of every 1,000 suspected rape perpetrators referred to for prosecution, 317 have at least one prior felony conviction. 520 will be released either because they posted bail or for other reasons while awaiting trial. And 70 of the released perpetrators will be arrested for committing another or similar sexual assault crime. I'm starting off with these stats to highlight that gender-based violence is more prevalent in societies where there is a culture of violence and where male superiority is treated as the norm. These men have no identifying marks. They are somebody's son, brother, husband, father, and leader. These men are like Mark Zinde, Oscar Pistorius, Sandile Manso, and Mortimer Saunders. They show that gender-based violence is not limited to one race, religion, or cultural group. These acts of violence are conducted by men, and it should be condemned by men. Societies free of gender-based violence do not exist, and South Africa is no exception. The recent violence against women in our country is the most dehumanizing gender oppression. Women are paying the price in our country. In 2018-19, 2,930 women were murdered in South Africa, meaning every 3 hours a woman is murdered. 110 rape cases are reported daily. South Africa's femicide rate is 5 times higher than the global average. 1 in every 5 women experience violence at the hand of the partner. When a child's rapist is released due to lack of evidence, a daughter dies in a post office, a fighting legend dies with a restraining order in hand, a mother is murdered in front of a child, and a grandmother is gruesomely murdered on a farm, questions needs to be asked. To what extent is law enforcement able to ignore the steps they need to take to prevent and prosecute these crimes? Mr. President, it is concerning to note that the National Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Strategic Plan has not been finalized, and that there is no budget allocation to address gender-based violence in the Ministry of Women, Youth and People Living with Disabilities. We should put our money where our mouth is and have the political will to address the scourge of gender-based violence. It is time that we as leaders in this House exercise our power by addressing the gaps in legislation dealing with sexual offences against our most vulnerable. It is us in this House that should not falter in our oversight mandate to ensure that never again will police stations be without rape kits. And it is us that should ensure that our education, health and justice systems are capacitated to deal with gender-based violence. Mr. President, your interventions are noble on dealing with gender-based violence. However, we've heard this story before. A plan without action remains just that, a plan. Enough is enough. Time for action is now. Backlashes against movements such as Am I Next, Men Are Trust, are to be expected, and it should not serve as a deterrent. We are tired of being undervalued and disregarded. Women will not be silenced. We are paving the way for the next generation to never experience the level of horrific violence we do. Uyinene, Leandra, Angelique, Jess, Riva, Krabu, and Kwezi, the echoing of your voices will never be silent. Watinta bafazi, watinta mbokodo.
Honorable Mufokeng.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, honorable members. This debate perhaps offers an opportunity to reflect on who we are, where we come from, and where we are going. Our point of departure is to affirm that the ANC has and it will always be an a Pan-African organization, committed to the unity of Africa, the renaissance of our continent, and the solidarity among the people of Africa. In 1906, 6 years before the formation of the then South African Native Congress, which later was known as the ANC, Dr. Pixley Isaka Seme rose to give a lecture at the Columbian University calling for regeneration of Africa. In his words, Dr. Seme envisioned an Africa of hope, an Africa of prosperity, and an Africa at peace with itself. The word of Dr. Seme became an umbilical cord through which the African National Congress has been tied to the continent of Africa for all years of its existence. The ANC has been advancing a struggle against colonialism and apartheid to ensure that the African children direct their energies to advancing the victories of peace greater and more abiding than the spoils of war. In response to the establishment of the Union of Africa by the British Parliament, Dr. Seme made a clear call to all Africans to unite. He made this call by firstly addressing that would be an obstacle to that unity of Africa. Among other things, he said, "We are the people," close quote. It was on the basis of the appreciation of oneness of the African people that the ANC was formed to fight against colonialism. In 1912, when the ANC was formed, it made sure that it encourages other countries. We know that Lesotho, Swaziland, Botswana, and Zambia, and other countries were invited and represented by their kings and chiefs. Therefore, from its formation, the ANC was never formed for South Africans only. It was formed for all Africans in the southern of Africa. Some years after the formation, the ANC made sure that it helped also other organizations, the Zambian African National Congress that was led by Comrade Kenneth Kaunda. It also made sure that it gives support to then the Rhodesian African National Congress that was led by the late Zimbabwe Mugabe. I reiterate that we are, as the ANC, a Pan-African organization committed to the unity and prosperity of Africa and its people. In Addis Ababa in 1963, the leaders of independent African states met and formed the Organization of African Unity. As part of the founding resolution of the summit, independent African states agreed to coordinate and intensify their efforts to put the end to the South African government criminal policies. And therefore, they even decided in those meetings that they will make sure that South Africans that will come in exile, they'll be granted scholarships, educational facilities, and possibilities of employment, and it happened. It is common cause that our countries such as Tanzania, Zambia, Angola, Lesotho, and Swaziland, Mozambique, Nigeria, and many other African countries heeded this call by the OAU to coordinate and intensify the effort to end apartheid. These countries played host to many of our liberation fighters and offered them support. The important matters to emphasize that South Africans were accepted in these other countries, and they were actually abiding by the rules of those countries. Lorona ra kopa gore batho ba ra etetse mo country ya rona ba re tlhompe ba ye go di officing ba batle dipampiri tsa bona tsa molao ka le rona ha re kena ko bona re kena ka tlhompho ebile ba fitileng ba kileng ba dula mo ba ne ba ba tlhompha. We all know that these efforts of African states culminated to the demise of apartheid, and we really appreciate that as South Africans. In 1994, the ANC made sure that we have the policy, the foreign policy. Our foreign policy moves from the premise that first and foremost, South Africa is an African country. It is our firm belief that the development of South Africa is tied to the development of Africa. Our commitment to the renaissance of Africa is beyond doubt. Our commitment to the agenda of the integration of Africa and championed by the African Union is without question. This debate caused us to engage on a very painful matter relating to the incidents of criminality and violence which has been happening in our country. These acts of criminality and violence must be condemned. We, however, have a responsibility to correctly diagnose what is the root cause of the acts of criminality and violence before we can define what we are dealing with. We have laws, and they should be adhered to in this country. Our police, ra kopa, le ba ba sebetsang ko Home Affairs, bo minister ba rena, re kopa le re thuse gore batho ga ba etsa mosebetsi wa bona, ba wetse ka maitsetseleko, ka tlhompho, ba itse gore batho ba tshwanetse gore ba thole di-document tsa bona ka o tshwanela. Ba ba senang tsona ka nakong e, re kopa le rena re ba tshware ka mokgwa o ne ba re tshwere, ba ye ko di-officing ba di fitlhelele. There are some among us judge South African as being xenophobic, otherwise being Afrophobic. The accusations are false and will continue to be proven to be false. For many decades, South Africans welcome the Africans compatriot without hostilities towards one another. Marriages among Africans across artificial borders have been part of our lives for many years. Harino bolela gore ya ko khole, habo Mandela re na le bo Mmane from Mozambique, habo Ramaphosa re na le bo Makoti ho tla ka mo Uganda, habo mo Dlamini Zuma re na le bo Mkhwenyana ho tla ka mo Zimbabwe. We have been marrying across cultural. We have Africans among us that engage in businesses and such as saloon and nail bars, and we support them. And we are hoping that from now on, before you do anything with them, ask them if they are documented. But we also condemn those business dealings that are done with undocumented people by the people that are renting properties to them. The African and Africans are now engaged on the agenda set by the African Union. The agenda seeks to reorientate the economic outlook of African countries to look inward without the continent, with the intention of stimulating economic activities among African states. This will ensure that African countries will raise productivity and address policy unemployment, inequality, and poverty. In terms of the number of participation of this country, will be the world's largest trade ever since to be formed. We are affirming our commitment to the unity and prosperity of Africa. South African companies must take advantage of this trade agreement. In conclusion, the ANC condemns the criminality, violence, and all the things that are happening that have been done in our country and drugs. We must say no to illegality, regardless of who committed and where they come from. South Africans are urged to respect the laws of any other country they visit in Africa and elsewhere in the world. In the same vein, we urge our guests to live freely among us in our country and respect the laws of our land. Our President Obuletsa Are, Marumo Fase, ke a leboga.
Thank you. Honorable Minister of Police.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, the honorable member, the leadership of Salman. It's a mother of Masichaba who left at 14 years, not Sichaba. Sichaba was born in Zambia as Lekalake. The mother is Sibongile Khumalo. So my point is that you don't come here and lie. Chairperson, the Deputy Speaker.
Honorable Kaile, you do not say members lie. That's unparliamentary. Just withdraw that.
I withdraw. You don't come here and tell a semi-truth. Deputy Speaker, we had a terrible
point of order
week.
Yes, honorable member.
Can the member please sit, Minister?
We are not a chair. We are not going to be told by you that.
Yes,
there is a presiding officer here.
Yes.
I'll listen to the
honorable
presiding
member.
officer, not you.
Yes, the member didn't withdraw unconditionally because he made a remark after
Yeah.
that.
It's withdrawn.
Same thing.
Chair, Deputy Speaker, we had a terrible week. We had a terrible week,
Just withdraw.
especially with our young women, starting from Nene, a young other woman that was killed in the University of Western Cape, and the other one that lost her life last night after she has been brought heavily drugged from wherever she was taken, and others that were told in one of the technicons here, they were raped, 4 of them, 4 weeks, 8 of them. So on that, I will take an advice from Mr. Whitfield that on these matters we'll have definitely work together. We can't come here and talk politics on these matters. By the way, not only you and all other members and all other South Africans that they want to deal and really fight this scourge, so that maybe one day the dream of a young woman walking alone in the middle of the night without fear is achieved in the Republic of South Africa. And then to the parents, to the sisters, friends, colleagues of all those people that have been killed, we are saying we are amazed by their resilience, and South Africans must really support them. And it's an issue that can't just be once off. It's an issue that we need to really put a lot of shoulder on it, and we work on it together. Somebody came here and gave them some statistics about the women raped, not tried, and all that kind of stuff. One statistic that was not given is that in South Africa, as we speak, we've got 4,728 people that are doing life sentence for the sexual offenses. 4,000 are doing life, and not just in prison, but are doing life. Yes, it might not be enough. It might not be enough, but something is being done. That's why we're inviting everybody to be part of this. And the honorable member, Groenewald, spoke about special units. This is one special unit that we have brought back, the FCS, to deal with the family and the abuse of women matters. And we shall forever accept those suggestions that make sense. The problem that started on the 2nd at GP, where South African police, I repeat, are dealing with criminality. You will pardon South African police, we don't deal with xenophobia or South Africans and all, we deal with criminality. We deal with criminals, we take criminals, we only know you when we begin to process you to know that what nationality you are. But we don't look at you and say, you look like a Zimbabwean, so we're arresting you. No, we don't do that. We look at the criminal, we arrest the criminal, and then it happens to be either a foreign national or a South African national. So for us, it's nothing to do with xenophobia, it's all to do with criminality. And then it happened that the shops were banned around the precincts of the station in Glenville. We moved in that street where all, without exception, shops were banned there. There were South African shops, clearly, like your ShopRite, you know that's a South African shop, shops like your Jet, shops like your USafe, that were banned there. They all first looted, and then they were banned. So go to Jimmy's, KFC were banned. I know it's not a South African shop, KFC, but they were banned, and all that kind of thing. So, which told us that we are dealing with criminality, and it's not true that those shops were selected to be banned. Every shop that was there was banned. So it led to us arresting those people that were committing that crime. Up to this point, people we have arrested, there are 639, including yesterday, we arrested 15 in Thokoza that were continuing doing these things. But going back to Mr. Whitfield, I would like us to have some discussions because there are things that are not very much factual. One thing about this myth of the intelligence that is not working, that's a myth. There are so many things that are stopped before they happened here in South Africa because we have intelligence that otherwise there could have been a lot of trouble. So even now, the places that were attacked, they are less than the places where there was prevention. We got the information that they were going to be attacking Soshanguve, Nockham Park, Primrose, Eden Park, Kagiso, Don Park, Midrand, Sprateville, Alberton, and all were stopped before they could happen. That is the work of the intelligence. So it's not very much correct to say the intelligence is not functioning. So the question of working together, I'll emphasize that, but also the question of fake news, somebody spoke about that. Maybe for me, it will be opportune to say, I want to stand here and thank the South African Police Service men and women in blue. Because it's unfortunate that people will not see their work. Day and night, long hours, stopping, preventing, protecting South Africans. We are saying South African police have done the good job. Many of them are good men and women. Few of them are rotten apples like all other communities where we have some rotten apples. But here in South Africa, we have good police that sometimes overworked, but working very well. So we stand here as the Minister of Police, I hope with many members here, saying bravo to the men and women in blue. Chairperson, maybe just a little bit of Sheng. So Galisa, ngicabanga ukuthi kwaba nenkingana endleleni masilungisela lo mcimbi obewuzoba seGoli ehostel. Inkinga ebekhona ukuthi masithola umbiko ukuthi kunomonakalo saya khona siyozama ukulungisa izinto esasithole ukuthi okunye abantu ababentshontshile babaleka bangena ehostel. Kunomsindo ukuthi abantu abahlala emahostela nabantu abawuhlanga oluthile. Sasingayanga ngaloko. Sase ukuyolungisa sibheke ukuthi sikwazi ukubuyisana ukuthi lungabhebhetheki udlame maduze nendawo lokuzeke khona. Masifika khona ngolwesibili saba neqoqo lekomiti elalizolungisela ukuthi kube nomcimbi ozoba khona ngesonto, umcimbi obizwa ngembizo la sizoxoxa khona. Owangezuba umcimbi kaNgqongqoshe wezamaphoyisa. Abantu esasilungisa nabo ikakhulu belidwa zinduna, induna eyilida kakhulu ubaba uMhlongo nenduna uMvelasi noZwane. Abathi bazocela kube khona amanye ama-department kahulumeni ukuze baphakamise izinto ezizoxoxwa ngohulumeni. Bawabala ama-department yamaphoyisa, i-social development, i-home affairs, i-justice, ne-COGTA. Kwalungiswa-ke batshelwa noPrima sonke satshelwa ukuthi siya kwalungiswa. Kwathi ngolwesine ebusuku ngathola ucingo oluvela kongangezwe lakhe uBhejane ephuma esiqiwini ethi akathandanga indlela ekulungiselwe ngayo ngokuthi angathintwa kusetshenzwe nenduna angathintwa. Ngakho-ke saxoxisana kakhulu nongangezwe lakhe savumelana ukuthi kuyofanele uhoxiswe lo mcimbi ukuze uphinde ulungiselelwe ngendlela oyiyo. Umuntu engikhuluma naye eqenjini lenkatha okubaba uGwala ngamtshela lolu daba ukuthi awusaqhubeki, savumelana ukuthi asisezuqhuba umcimbi njengohulumeni sesiyobuye sulungiselele. Ngithuka lapho-ke mina bangivuka ngesonto ekuseni sengitshelwa engisebenza nabo ukuthi ngiyazi yini ukuthi umcimbi uyaqhubeka na. Ngithi mina ngazi ngiseThekwini ngigcine umcimbi ungaqhubeki bese kuthiwa umntwana wakaphinda ngene uyaya ukuyokhuluma nomcimbi ongasewona okwahulumeni ngoba ngothungu lwesihlanu ngakhipha incwadi yakubona bonke abantu ababezoya kulo mcimbi ukuthi siwuhoxisile sobuye siwulungisele. Kungokwazi kwethu ukuthi lo mcimbi kwangasewona okwahulumeni ukuthi-ke wawusungene kanjani wawusuze kanjani lokho kwengithi khona mina angikwazi ngoba ngokahulumeni wahoxiswa lo mcimbi. Isimo-ke sinjalo kuze kube ukuthi ilokho okwenzeka izolo. Umcimbi ngiyaphinda bengesewona okahulumeni wonke umuntu wazile. Angivamisile ukuxoxa noShenge, ngiyangixoxe nobaba uGwala kube uyena ukuxhumana noShenge. uShenge wayebhalile incwadi encane ngayithola lapha ngathi mina wemcimbini kahulumeni wonke abaholi bangeza. Lokho kungangaphambi kokuthi ngithole umyalezo ovela embubeni ukuthi izocela ukuthi kubuye kuthi kulungiselelwa kancane lokho. Uhlehle kanjalo-ke ngiyaphinda futhi ngiyasho ukuthi umcimbi waqhubeka ngesonto. Kwangasewona umcimbi olungiselwe uhulumeni, kwangasewona umcimbi angathi ucele mina athi uyawazi. Kwakuwumcimbi engangitshele wonke umuntu owayewazi ukuthi uyahlehla lo mcimbi. Leyo ndaba ngifuna-ke icace kanjalo, akusikho ukuthi ingoba kunokudilelana khona, ingoba iqiniso linjalo kwahamba kanjalo. Lokho engikushoyo engokusho noma ikuphi, lokho engikushoyo engakhuluma nembube, ngakhuluma nomholi we-IFP, ngakhuluma nabaholi bakahulumeni ababekhona, sawuhlehlisa kanjalo kumcimbi. Ngiyabonga kakhulu.
Siyabonga Honorable Minister.
Khona record ukuthi ngiqobisana noNgqongqoshe ngoba ngikhulisanga kanjalo. Kodwa iqiniso ukuthi emva koba uNgqongqoshe seshilo ukuthi le mhlangano wakhe awusekho, ngamtshela ukuthi ngizokuya nokuyokhuluma nabantu emva koba ethe khona abantu abasehostela abonakale begijima nempahla zokwebiwa bengena lapha. uNgqongqoshe wathi uzongilungisela kahle ukuthi iphephe kungabi khona olwenzekayo olubi. Ekuseni ngakusasa
Siyabonga Chair.
Umhlonishwa ekuseni ngakusasa abaholi bangitshela nenduna ukuthi umhlonishwa Mazibuko iMEC ithe izoba khona. uthe emva kwesikhathi basebethi hayi useqolisile ngoba uthi usenqatshelwe undunankulu uMakhura ukuthi angezi.
Baba Chair.
Manje ke ngithanda angithoni mina Magaye ukuthi
Sibongela Mhlonishwa.
ngongqongqoshe ngifuna uba nguchaze lokho ngoba akufuneki uba kurekhoda amanga kuhansard.
Uzwakele Chair.
Ngife kurekhoda amanga kuhansard.
Siyabonga Baba Chair. Thank you, honorable members. The next item on the order paper is a subject for discussion in the name of the Honorable Gigi Hill-Lewis on government's proposal to introduce a regime of prescribed assets in South Africa, which threatens the pension savings of millions of South Africans. The Honorable Gigi Hill-Lewis.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable members, the government's proposition is quite simple. They have run all of the state-owned entities right into the ground. Those companies now need enormous bailouts just to stay afloat. But there is no more money for bailouts because debt is unsustainably high, taxes are maxed out, and we're running record deficits. Borrowing more is expensive, with 10-year bond yields costing around 10%, which only makes the problem worse as interest payments climb. So what to do? The government could do the hard work of fixing those entities, but that would require real leadership and real tough decisions. It would require a confrontation with the unions and an honest admission that the central dogma of state control has failed. Those things are just too difficult for the ANC to do. So instead, this government has reached back into time and has plucked a policy straight from the National Party apartheid government of the 1980s. When that apartheid government was in the final phases of burying itself in the junk heap of history, P.W. Botha also told the country that pension funds needed to be patriotic. And so we come back to the present, with the ANC's 2019 election manifesto promising to investigate a regime of so-called prescribed assets. And this was confirmed by the President during question time in this House 2 weeks ago. After a mealy-mouthed obfuscation at first, and after being pressed by the Chief Whip and the Leader of the Opposition, he confirmed that prescribed assets is definitely on the way. I could quote you the Hansard, but the President is so verbose and slow to coming to the point, a little bit like his presidency really, that you'll have to go and read it for yourself. The ANC is reduced to copying the desperate policies of a failing apartheid government. I ask you, how low have they fallen? Some may call that complete moral and political bankruptcy. You call it the New Dawn. They may have euphemistically referred to prescribed assets, but let's be absolutely clear what we're talking about. They are proposing to force every pension fund, public and private, to lend money to the government and to the state-owned companies. Now, normally, the interest rate should compensate the lender for the risk of extending the loan. But if the lender is forced by law to make the loan, then it is the borrower, in this case the state, who dictates the interest rate. This means lower investment returns for hard-working South Africans for the rest of their working lives, and smaller pensions for hard-working South Africans when they retire. I did a rough calculation. Assuming the government starts off taking 3% of pension funds, a number that has been bandied about by the ANC, a 35-year-old South African who is saving 2,000 Rand a month in their pension and who does so diligently until retirement would lose 1.4 million Rand in savings. So let's cut the nonsense and call it what it is: pension theft. This government is proposing to steal from the pensions of hard-working South Africans to pay for their mismanagement. And don't be persuaded for a minute by the argument that 3% is where it will stop. Once the principle is established that it's okay to steal, the quantum will just ratchet up year after year. In fact, the DA warned in the debate over the amendment to Section 25, I clearly remember the Chief Whip of the Opposition making this warning, that you cannot compromise on the principle of private property ownership, because when you undermine any property rights, you undermine all property rights, even your future pension. I didn't even imagine at the time that this warning would come true so soon. Stealing from people's future pensions is still theft, plain and simple, and should be fought by every South African who has diligently saved for their retirement. Let the word go out that the ANC, the self-proclaimed vanguard of the working classes, is coming for the workers' pensions. And the government doesn't need to change any law to do this. It can be done with a simple regulation. We in the DA believe that such a change would illegally and unconstitutionally deprive people of their own savings without their permission. So if the ANC does go ahead with this mad idea, we will table private members' legislation to allow South Africans to withdraw their pensions without having to resign their jobs. And our legislation will allow them to opt out of compulsory pension contributions. If we didn't do this, you would see thousands of workers resigning their jobs just to save their pensions. And government employees must not think that they are safe either. The state pays their salaries and guarantees their pensions, and then uses those same pensions to buy government-guaranteed debt in bankrupt SOEs. All of those guarantees only last as long as there is money in the bank. When the money's gone, the guarantee is gone, and the defined benefit guarantee will be the first thing to go. So nurses, teachers, police officers, social workers, doctors, every public employee should get behind the DA in fighting this theft of their pensions. And this brings me to the trade unions. Where is COSATU and its affiliates? Where are their representatives in this House? These unions haven't said a thing, and COSATU has even offered cautious, in-principle support. Why are they not speaking for their members? Every member of these unions should ask what they pay their membership fees for. Does COSATU represent their members to the ANC, or do they represent the ANC to their members? COSATU's slogan is an injury to one is an injury to all. But this proposal is an injury to all, and you have not mustered the voice to speak for even one. But worse, honourable members, than the silence of many trade unions is the sickening sycophancy of the asset management industry. Asset prescription is inimical to efficient capital allocation in the market. Yet these managers have shown that they are prepared to accept almost any outrage, so long as it is presented in a new dawn wrapper. And so now we have the grotesque spectacle of asset prescription proudly brought to you by Colin Coleman of Goldman Sachs, of all companies, Magda Wierzicka of Signia, and Wayne McCurry of FNB Wealth. Honourable members, here we have again the alliance of big state, big unions and big business working together with no regard for the best interests of ordinary South Africans. Only the DA is fighting for the working man and woman. Only the DA is protecting the family. Only the DA is creating work and growing the economy for job seekers. Let me tell the ANC now, you will not get to pilfer people's pensions without a fight, and we in the DA will lead the fight to stop this theft. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Abraham.
Okay, thank you very much. Honourable House Chair, Honourable Deputy President, Honourable Members, in the recent past, our economy recorded high growth accompanied by shedding jobs. This is a reality. This was a result of financialization of our economy, which means engaging in speculative investment as opposed to investment in productive activity. The ANC, Honorable Chair, is not a reckless government. On the contrary, we are a caring government. We make an admission
Order, honorable members.
that our economy is not performing. It is in dire strain. That is an admission that each and every one of us here has to make. We will come back to this later, but most important is that we acknowledge the weakness, but we do not end there. We have a duty to come with solutions and support the President's exploratory direction. Honorable Chair, let me remind Honorable Hill Lewis, because he doesn't walk the distance as he raises the issue of the apartheid era laws. Intentionally, it's very useful. It's useless because you are there. The issue of prescribed assets is not a new issue in our country. You are right, Honorable Member. The Pension Funds Act of 1956 held prescribed assets levels to 75% for the Public Investment Corporation and 33% for long-term insurers. These prescribed assets were to be invested in the debt of state-owned companies and government bonds. At the height of the apartheid regime between 1956 and 1989, when South Africa was economically cut off from global financial markets, the regime put on the prescribed assets policy in order to stimulate domestic investment and therefore economic growth. The industrialization and employment creation drive of the apartheid regime in the 50s, 60s, and so on spawned many enterprises to play an important role in the economy. Your railways, your harbors, your diners, your Armscor, your SAAs, even the now disbanded nuclear program. These enterprises did not only support the economy and provide jobs, but they also provided generous benefits such as training, subsidized housing, and employee benefits, pensions, health, disability, and death benefits. These projects, together with job preservation, were instrumental in ending the white, especially Afrikaner, unemployment and poverty. The majority of the oppressed, however, remained uncatered for at the time. They provided a cadre of trained artisans and professionals for industry and the economy as a whole, as well as entrepreneurs on whom the country relied on. The question then is, did these and other similar initiatives make prescribed assets worthwhile, even if the investment return was constrained only to a few privileged? Perhaps we should as well highlight some of the achievements of GEPF. Through its investment wing, the PIC, to illustrate how investments by state institutions in the productive sectors can contribute to economic growth. The GPF report of 2018 record that the investment grew by 8.3 during 2017 and 18 financial year. This was largely driven by allocations into domestic assets, particularly domestic bonds and equities. The PIC, on behalf of GPF, is investing in strategic sectors which will create jobs and economic growth. These investments include the liquefied petroleum gas import terminal in Saldanha Bay. This project presents an attractive investment for the GPF, while also enabling the pension fund to play a role in job creation. The PIC board, I will repeat this again, is now inclusive of the trade union movement because the government of the ANC is learning from past mistakes. During the reporting period, the pension fund's investments supported 538 SMEs in sectors such as housing, energy, health, tourism, and agriculture. The GPF invests in affordable housing infrastructure to contribute to a realization of the goals of the NDP while ensuring sustainable financial returns from investments. Through its investments, the pension fund has also allocated 664 housing projects and 34,000 housing units. Now, the ANC sponsors a developmental approach to transform our economy, in which strategic state-owned enterprises should play a role in economic growth. This debate by the DA raises a number of questions. One of the questions is whether this debate is an ideological debate in which the DA intends to convince us of its neoliberal ideological stance, which is not relevant to the South African economy challenges. The other question is whether the DA seeks to subject us to scarecrow tactics of sensationalizing what government is suggesting in our policy. Given that the DA has not done so well in recent elections, it will be expected that it will try all tactics in the book to gain lost ground.
Honorable members. Honorable members, order, please.
To illustrate the scarecrow tactics of the DA, perhaps we should quote Mr. Hill Lewis when he said on our policy proposal, asset prescription is an irresponsible, unacceptable policy proposal. It should be rejected by all South Africans. It is perfectly obvious that our policy on prescribed assets will not be rejected by every South African, because not every South African voted for you, Honorable Hill Lewis. The overwhelming South Africans voted for the ANC while we proposed this policy to them. Our conference resolution says that our government should introduce measures to ensure adequate financial resources directed to developmental purposes. The solution goes further to say a new prescribed asset requirement should be investigated to ensure that a portion of all financial institutions' funds be invested in public infrastructure, skills development, and job creation. In response to the question on the same subjects of prescribed assets asked by Mr. Maimane, the President responded by saying the issue of prescribed assets has been discussed over and over again. And in the end, we are going to pursue policies that are going to advance the interests of the majority of the people of South Africa. They have been oppressed for too long. We are going to advance the interests of pension fund holders, the very workers of this country who are members of trade unions. For the first time, I hear Honorable Hill Lewis representing trade unions. It's laughable. Both the conference resolution and the response by the President are consistent with the character of the ANC, which is about application of evidence-based policy implementation, which requires that we should be guided by the realities on the ground. We are turning the corner in favor of the people.
Honorable Shivambu.
No, thank you very much, House Chairperson. I think we should perhaps take a nuanced approach and give a clearer context of what this debate is all about. So the size of retirement funds in South Africa is about 4.2 trillion rands. And about 1.8 trillion of that belongs to the government employees pension fund. And the manner in which retirement funds are managed is through asset management companies. The biggest asset management company is a state-owned Public Investments Corporation, the PIC. It's 100% owned by the state and is the biggest asset manager in the continent, one, but also it is the best performing asset manager in the entire continent, even compared to the privately owned asset managers. It does better than Sanlam or Old Mutual or Coronation or Alan Gray asset management companies. So you have got a state-owned asset management company that is performing far much better than the privately owned asset management companies. And already the PIC is exposed to both government and parastatal bonds. So I don't know what we're debating if all of us know now that the PIC is exposed to government bonds. It invests in developmental projects. It has got private equity investments that it makes. Actually, the biggest danger of the PIC's investments is in the listed space, with a recent loss of more than 20 billion through investments in Steinhoff. So I think that this is a non-debate really in terms of what the DA is portraying the issue and raising false alarms to cause panic. Now the ANC says in its election manifesto that you're going to investigate the introduction of prescribed assets. But you do that in a broad and not clearly comprehensive developmental strategy and agenda. So it becomes problematic when you just say you want to investigate the introduction of prescribed assets without clearly defining under which developmental mandate and strategy do you want to introduce or investigate prescribed assets. Because it must be located within a development agenda. What do you seek to achieve, when, and how do you want to achieve that? Because the nonsensical proposal that is being brought by the Minister of Finance cannot fit squarely into this prescribed assets agenda that is mentioned in your own manifesto. It is correct that for 33 years, the apartheid government had prescribed assets from 1956 to 1989, meaning that apartheid was anchored financially by pension funds. It was utilized to guarantee the jobs and the happiness of the white minority. So there is absolutely nothing wrong that if it is properly located within a proper developmental program, we should have prescribed assets in South Africa, but the approach should be nuanced. I want to explain what should be done in terms of all of those issues. One is that we need to consolidate all municipal pension funds. So 230 odd municipalities in South Africa have got different pension funds, majority of that managed by private pension fund managers. So those must be consolidated into one pension fund. We must then have a municipal employees pension fund and then give an asset manager to then deal with the developmental investments of that pension fund which would have been consolidated. And of course, deliberately focusing on municipal infrastructure and other developmental impactful investments that must be looked into. And then we should set a target, which we say in the EFF elections manifesto, must be 30% of all the pension funds must be invested in the productive, job-creating, labor-absorptive sectors of the economy. And deliberately in private equity, because playing with the money of pension funds just in the stock markets without the job returns is wasteful. It is just bloating the stock exchange to more than 15 trillion market capitalization, but there are no jobs out of that. So we need to give a different direction in terms of what should happen. Now the nuance is that the already existing PIC or GPF exposure to government bonds should be converted into equity. We should introduce a new model of state ownership of these state-owned companies, meaning that you must have, of course, parts of government through the Ministry of Public Enterprises or other entities owning a portion, but the PIC or the GPF should own equity in state-owned companies such as ESCOM and Transnet, and then would then have a different approach to how we deal with these issues. But really, there is no debate that is worthy of the sensationalism that the DA is introducing now. Because already Regulation 28 in the pension fund is already regulating the manner in which pension funds must be invested, in which asset classes do we put these investments. So there is no debate that is even calling for the participation or the anger of workers as is being portrayed. It's just a scarecrow which is fundamentally based on the racist distrust of a black management of common resources.
Thank you very much.
That must be managed. Thank you very much.
Honorable Chelezi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, House Chairperson. It goes beyond me to think that today we rise to this podium to debate whether or not government should prescribe assets in South Africa. This debate speaks less of the subject matter, but more of the fundamental question of whether government can or should be trusted with hard-earned pension savings of employees' funds to fund government's own social and economic development and failing SOEs. The fact that you are even having this debate simply confirms what we've been saying in this House, that this government has dropped the ball. It is shameful and indefensible that government, with all the problems that it needs to sort out first, now wishes to gamble with the public pension fund. Yet, knowing very well that this government takes this money, there are no guarantees. Honorable Chairperson, the IFP has repeatedly told this House and in committee challenged begging CEOs and their boards that we are throwing money at a problem which are non-financial. This is the moral and ethical deficit that we are facing, and this is our serious problem. If we place corrupt and questionable individuals at the helm of any organization, you cannot expect miracles to happen. Confidence in this government right now is at an all-time low. How can it be trusted to make the right investment decisions on behalf of people? This does not bode well with the public service. This government is setting off our own alarm bells when it comes to managing the economy and finances of this country, and stress letter about the credit ratings and scores of rating agencies. How can then it be trusted? Honorable Chairperson, this government does not have a sense of crisis or agency. It continues on the same trajectory leading to a total calamity and behave as business as usual. How can it be trusted? We all know that this government is characterized by incompetence, corruption, and therefore we cannot trust government to make the right investment decisions on behalf of our people. We have been down this road before. When the PIC wanted to take pension funds, we saw hordes of teachers and public servants taking early retirement packages out of fear. And this on its own was showing that this idea is not welcomed. Today, we wish to plead the Honourable Minister of Finance and his colleagues in the economic cluster to abandon this proposal and restore confidence first before trying to get their hands on the pension kitty many have served for so long to enjoy their retirement. And the majority of these people are not serving to enjoy their retirement, but to further fund and finance their grandchildren and great-grandchildren's education. Therefore, this is not the right way to take. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Vessels.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. House Chair, the term unintended consequences come to mind. We always hear when government describes or defends detrimental effects of certain policies that it's unintended consequences. I want to ask the ruling party to today listen and take the unintended consequences into effect now. You see, many policies start with noble ideas, but ignoring the probable unintended consequences. Investment into developmental assets is critical to ignite social and economic development and to create jobs. That's noble. But learn from the past. And the Honourable Abraham is absolutely correct. The National Party attempted to do exactly the same through prescription. But go and look at what the long-term effect thereof was. Go and look what the state of the government employees pension fund was in 1994 as a result thereof, completely depleted. You are going to gamble away the money of the pensioners. Contrary to government's concerted efforts and the positive changes achieved to date through the retirement reform initiatives, prescription will result in a reduction of investment returns and would leave members of pension funds poorer. The risk to investors in pension funds would be that they would have to increase their contributions, work longer, and contribute longer due to the poor performance of their investments. The main objective, Chairperson, of prescription is that assets are prescribed because there isn't sufficient demand for them based on their investment merits. In other words, if assets had sufficient investment merits, there would be no need to prescribe them. Government should rather then work on the restructuring of state-owned entities than to prescribe assets. Why are our state-owned entities in the state that they are in? Staatsentiteite, agbare voorsitter, is leeg gesteel en totaal en al van bestuur. Die korrup het ons staatsentiteite leeg geplunder. Die lede aan my regterkant is ek doodseker van, agbare voorsitter en sekere ander lede in die huis wat 'n affiniteit vir rooi het, slyp hulle tande en slaan hulle hande by mekaar en sien dollartekens wanneer ons praat oor voorgeskrewe beleggings, want hulle is seker dat hulle sien hoeveel meer miljarde daar gaan wees om te steel en te plunder. Agbare Abraham moet kennis neem van die feit dat dit die mees arm mense in Suid-Afrika is wat die meeste gaan ly as hierdie beleid van die ANC deurgevoer gaan word. Dit is die mees ondeurdagte beleidsrigting. En agbare voorsitter, ek verstaan nie die agbare Abraham nie. Wil sy soos die apartheidsregering wees? Wil sy soos die NP wees? Want dit lyk my so. U sien, agbare voorsitter, geskiedenis herhaal homself altyd. Die ANC raak al hoe meer soos die nasionale party. Al hoe meer met hulle geheimhouding, met hulle korrupsie en met die manier waarop hulle die land bestuur. U het geleer van die beste, maar u gaan dieselfde pad as die nasionale party loop. U gaan ook mag verloor. En u moet baie mooi u eie profesie in hierdie huis na luister. U gaan die mag verloor, agbare Abraham, van die nasionale party het die mense se geld weg. Die mense se geld is weg, die mense se geld gaan weer weg wees. U mag gaan weg wees, ek dankie.
Baie dankie. Mr. Saropen, honorable member.
Thank you, House Chair. Chair, I never thought the day would come when I stand in this House, or sit in this House, and I hear the ANC and the EFF extol the virtues of National Party policy from the 1960s to 1989. In fact, I barely see anyone from the economics cluster here. I mean, they're running for cover. Where are they hiding from this debate today? I don't understand it. But what's even more amazing, Speaker, is I'm amazed at how the ANC is able to use code words to couch some very, very bad ideas. For example, we were once told that a private swimming pool constructed for the use of the ex-president was a fire pool. Now, this cover-up did no damage to the political careers of those involved. In fact, Minister Firepool is now the Minister of Labour, and the ANC's capacity for irony knows few limits. But the code word for today is prescribed assets, and as Honourable Hill Lewis made the point, it does not actually this innocuous thing. It is the theft of pension funds, money that people work and save their entire lives in the hopes that they can sustain themselves and cover their costs in their retirements. And you want to raid this money in order to pay for the damage that you've done to the country's finances and to its state-owned enterprises. Now, the ANC speaker said that the ANC is not a reckless government. And when you look at the debt levels of state-owned enterprises and government guarantees, near R1 trillion, that is reckless. That was reckless. There's no other way to describe it. Just watch 5 minutes of the Zondo Commission. I challenge any ANC member to spend 5 minutes watching the Zondo Commission to understand how reckless you are in government. That's why. Now, today, Eskom produces less electricity than it did a decade ago. But this ANC wants to raid pension funds because they paid its management bonuses in this time and bloated its staff structure. The next time I see an ANC MP canvassing a school teacher for a vote, please tell that school teacher that you're taking their pension fund because you bankrupted Eskom. Today, SAA runs fewer routes and flights than ever before, including profitable routes like Johannesburg to London and Johannesburg to Cape Town, but it is in need of a bailout. The next time you canvass a police officer for a vote, admit that you're taking his or her pension because you appointed Zuma's friend Dudu Mayeni to destroy the SAA. The SABC generates less revenue than ever before because you allow Claudia Motsoeneng, or looking at his testimony at the Zondo Commission, Claudia with a chance of meatballs, to destroy it. The next time an ANC MP canvasses a nurse for a vote, please admit to him or her that you're raiding their pension fund because you let Cloudy destroy the SABC. Now, Honourable Hill Lewis made the point. Many of these ANC MPs before us grew up in the trade union movement. And now that they have their parliamentary pension funds and top-up guarantees, they don't need to worry about the impact of prescribed assets, unlike ordinary South Africans, for whom lower returns will determine if they can afford bread or not in their retirement. For shame, you have forgotten where you have come from. Now, legalizing the theft of pension funds shouldn't be on the table. And even if comfortable millionaire managers go into Twitter and say, prescribe assets, just because they are millionaires who run asset management companies doesn't mean that they're interested in ordinary people. And so I say to my fellow South Africans today, if your fund manager says prescribed assets are okay, run for the hills. Move your fund to a manager who cares about whether or not you can retire with dignity. But there is an alternative to all of this. It's called growth. Some ANC MPs will be familiar with the term growth. You put it on your posters and billboards. Let's grow South Africa together. Remember that? It was a few months ago. Maybe you remember it. That was your promise. Growth will lead to more tax revenue that'll quench the ANC's insatiable thirst for spending other people's money. Growth will allow enough revenues to sort out the SOEs and government debt. Growth, most importantly, will pull millions of people out of poverty and reduce the burden on government services. But legalizing the theft of pension fund is not the way out of the mess the ANC has created. The National Treasury has proposed a growth-orientated economic strategy document that not a single ANC MP has stood up for or defended in this House. Now, with a handful of tweaks, this document is a blueprint to do what the ANC promised, grow South Africa. It's a pity that these ANC benches and back at Latuli House, it's filled and populated with enemies of growth. You'd think after a lost decade that the pursuit of growth would sit at the core of solving our problems in this country. Growth can restore people's dignity through jobs. Growth can restore the health of our fiscus and help our ailing SOEs. So I say to the ANC, stop trying to steal pension funds. Just do what you promised. Grow South Africa, and we'll help you do it. We'll join you. We'll grow South Africa together. But follow through on your core promise. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Swartz.
Thank you, House Chair. House Chair, the ACDP shares concerns about prescribed assets, and it is deeply ironic that one of the pillars of the apartheid regime could be making a spectacular comeback. It is, however, being sold with a different kind of rhetoric, that financial institutions are not doing enough for the developmental state, that they are chasing short-term returns on the JSE and overseas markets instead of investing in long-term infrastructure. One must remember, however, that the money invested in pension funds, whether in the public or the private sphere, belongs to ordinary workers who are saving for their retirement. Those policemen, those teachers, those nurses, those social workers, they need maximum returns on investment with a minimum risk. And behind every rand investors, there is a South African pensioner, a South African worker. Now, the regime of prescribed assets, as is indicated by previous speakers, requiring investors to invest in specified assets runs a high risk of poor investment returns. The reason for this is that the most likely form of prescription would be to force pension funds. At the moment, it is a choice where you buy. It's a choice for the PIC to buy certain bonds. This is an obligatory form to invest a portion of their assets in a predictable list of broken down state-owned enterprises such as Eskom, Sanral, SAA. And we know the remaining defined benefits funds such as the Government Employees Pension Fund cannot absorb lower investment returns. This has a negative impact on those pensioners. Just ask the Transnet pensioners. And it is estimated that a vast majority of pensioners who are on defined pension funds could have up to a 14% reduction in their pensions should prescribed assets result in compulsory funding of dysfunctional state-owned companies. This is totally unacceptable. And I'm sure that trade unions, once they grasp the enormity of this, will be opposing this move as well. We have witnessed widespread looting and plundering of SOEs. Many of us in this parliament were involved in the Eskom inquiry. We saw the corruption and the state capture. This has resulted in the precarious financial state of these SOEs. Now, for example, the new CEO of Business Leadership, Ms. Mavusa, has said, you can't steal so much money and think you're going to come back and say, to fix the mess in the SOEs that you have created over 10 years, we are now going to take your pension fund. It is not right. We in the ACDP agree with this position. We have to protect our pension funds, and the trust deficit still has to be restored. And we cannot allow what other speakers have said is a theft of pension funds through prescribed assets. The ACDP agrees.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. Honourable Makau.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, honourable members. The debate about prescribed assets needs sober minds and honesty. South Africa is a developmental state, and therefore, in whatever we do, there needs to be a golden trend to keep us in focus. The detractors of prescribed assets are not only dishonest, but are selfish and myopic in their approach. It is absurd that the funds of South Africans are only deployed in assets that benefit only the rich and affluent. A responsible prescribed asset approach will be one which takes into account return on investment risks. We're not saying plow money into the drain. We are saying that there are certain developmental projects, such as the building of universities, schools, setting up for the advancement of agriculture development, as well as rural infrastructure. The capitalists in the country are not interested in these projects because the biggest beneficiaries are the majority South Africans who are black. So in fact, to argue against prescribed asset has a racist element in it. ATM supports prescribed assets within a prudent funds disbursement into developmental projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable House Chair. Honourable House Chair, I'm actually shocked. Sitting there and hearing some of my colleagues say that the PIC is one of the greatest things that has happened to investment in Africa. I'm actually shocked if you look at their dismal performance over the last couple of years and the disastrous investments of our people's monies. I'm really shocked. But again, the question is, what is the intention when you make such statements? Are you putting yourself first because you're going to personally benefit from these things, like the VBS Bank? Is that what it is all about? Or is it protecting the funds of those people that have worked for centuries? I think that's the question we should be asking. So the EFF should be the last one coming to this podium and talking about investment of the poor, because you are the biggest looters of the poorest of the poor. Now, Yes, indeed, I think it would have been a great idea to take the investment of our pensioners and put it into development so that it could boost the economy in South Africa. But the question that we need to ask, with the state of our state-owned entities right now, with every other government department that is experiencing severe challenges in terms of management, can we trust those to take the funds of our pensioners and give it to them? Clearly the answer is no. So until such time we get our house in order and we are able to manage our affairs better, I think we should leave the funds alone and not go anywhere near them. Because clearly we're not in a position at this stage to manage them satisfactorily so that our people will benefit from it. And we know and we understand what has happened, particularly with the investments from the municipalities in the VBS Bank. My friends here were taking those monies and going and buying the best of, going to Gucci, going to Armani, going to here, going to there, going to everywhere. Is that what they're going to do with the pensioners' money? So really, I think we must be honest about this.
Members.
I think we must be honest about this. Whilst the idea might have been good, the timing is clearly wrong. The timing is not now. We need to get our house in order. We need to ensure that our state-owned entities are profitable. We need to ensure that when you take those pension funds and you invest them, there's going to be a positive return for those people that have worked for tens of years that are waiting to retire on those monies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Member. I do not see Honorable Nchaisa. Honorable Skwasana. Order, honorable members.
Angithokoze sihlalo hloniphekileko amalunga hloniphekileko wendlule yesibethamthetho nesitjhaba sonke seSouth Africa. Ngiyanilotshisa entambama. When the African National Congress at its 54th National Conference adopted the resolution on investment and allocation of resources, it was reaffirming a long-standing view debated in the early 1990s that financial resources need to be invested in prescribed assets for developmental purposes. These developmental purposes were defined as investment in public infrastructure, skills development, and job creation. True to the traditions and character of the ANC, it resolved to investigate this. I think you must underline that, Honorable Hill-Lewis, to investigate this so that the modality of investment in prescribed assets is based on the balance of evidence. Balance of evidence, international practice, in particular in developing countries, and the understanding, support, and trust of stakeholders. Underline that again, the trust of stakeholders. Hence, we're saying we're going to take we're taking a view that we need to consultation process that is going to take all these particular factors into consideration. Now, the answer to the question that was raised by Shibambo to say maybe the view is too broad, it does not specify as to what is the intention. The intention is that we seek to grow the economy and address the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. Now, the special role of retirement funds in investment, both in terms of the share of the retirement funds in financial assets, especially JSE and bonds, and B, the investment of retirement funds, have got to be debated. But I remember what we are addressing is that we have a sluggish economic growth and a rate of investment that does not match the needs of the country. This has to be addressed, and in doing this, the risk profile has to be developed and will be taken into account out of the experience we have. The good thing with us as the ANC is that we acknowledge that there are challenges. We are not burying our head in the sand. We acknowledge that there are challenges, that the economy is not growing as expected. Therefore, because we've got a responsibility to lead, so we're bringing intervention to say, how do we then, out of the current situation, grow the economy and address the challenges of, the triple challenges of unemployment, poverty, and inequality. And the difference between us and the DA is that we've got a responsibility to govern, whereas the DA, they've got a responsibility to oppose. Cheers. Now, retirement funds have a special role in modern economies. On one hand, they provide a central source of financing for both listed companies and governments. On the other, workers own a relatively large share of retirement funds. Both these factors mean that the retirement funds have social responsibility that go beyond the normal fiduciary requirements for investment by investment managers. The worry by the DA is that they are focusing on the returns, to say the returns, but they are not focusing on growing the economy. To say, how do we grow the economy? How do we create job opportunities? So we need to balance this. As much as we are looking at the issue of the returns, but let's also look at the issue of growing the economy. Honorable House Chair, taken together, the assets of public and private retirement funds were worth 3 trillion rands in 2017. Equal to 2/3 of the value of the whole economy. Retirement funds now hold 11% of all company shares, up from 6% in 1994. The public funds managed by the PIC alone account for 8% in JSE capitalization. 25 years ago, the figure was just 1%, with a fall due mostly to a change in regulations and the PIC's investment strategy. Now, despite the PIC's move into the JSE, retirement funds owned 30% of all public bonds in 2017, down from 40% in 1994. Public sector pensions saw their share in the funding of our government and its agencies drop from almost 1/3 to 1/5 in the past 25 years. Now, the retirement funds' huge financial holdings means that their decisions have a huge impact on the national economy. 2/3 of the pensions and provident assets are owned by ordinary working people in the poorest of the 90% household, while the richest, which is only 10% of the household, they own the remaining 1/3. But for comparison, Honorable House Chair, the richest 10% own well over 2/3 of all the other financial assets. So how are we going to address these inequalities if the DA and other opposition parties are standing to say, no, don't invest in the economy, don't grow the economy, don't address the inequalities? How are you going to do that? It means you are comfortable with the status quo. You are comfortable with the status quo because under apartheid, you benefited from the very same prescribed asset. And honorable vessels, it's not true to say the apartheid, they tried. No, they did not try. They did it for 33 years. I think Honorable Shibambo was explicit on that. And for the first time, I agree with Honorable Shibambo in this house. They did it for 33 years. So you benefited from prescribed assets for 33 years. So you can't say the apartheid government tried. No, they did it for 33 years, from 1956 to 1989. Now, Honorable House Chair, for workers, strong, sustained overall growth in the economy and employment is very important. For any pensioner, it is crucial that their children have jobs and they would accept the need for innovative investment to achieve that end. It's not true that pensioners are only worried about the returns, to say what are returns. No, they are also worried about job creations, because their children are unemployed. So they are also worried about that, and they are looking at government, for the government to provide solution for job creation and growing the economy. So it's not true that pensioners are only worried about their returns. They're also worried about growing the economy and job creation. Now, honorable members, unlike richer investors with large personal assets, ordinary working class retirees depend on collaboration between their fund managers and government to secure sustained economic and social development. Only then can they truly enjoy the fruits of their working lives. We need to move to a collaboration to boost investment in infrastructure and the real economy so as to promote industrialization, job creation, and growth. Cheers. Sitjhaba sekhethu, collaboration in ensuring development investment has become particularly urgent in the past few years. The combination of job losses and the decline in the GDP over the past 2 years only underscores the deep-seated challenge faced by the South African economy. This is part of a trend towards slower growth since 2015. We can understand this trend as a result of the convergence of international and domestic economic policy factors. Now, internationally, the end of the commodity boom in 2011 saw a sharp fall in the value of our mining export, with prices dropping between 25% and 50% for platinum, for gold, for iron ore, and coal. The result was a slowdown in both mining and heavy industry in South Africa and across the region. That in turn had a negative impact on our overall economy and especially manufacturing, which depends primarily on the domestic and regional market. Malunga hloniphekileko, in the past year, we have seen a slowdown in growth in most of our main export markets, especially China, India, and the European Union. Moreover, the growing uncertainty around the US trade and foreign policy seems likely to aggravate international instability in the next few years. We have to deal with the reality that the rules-based regime for international trade has been overturned in favor of economic bullying by the most powerful economy in the world. Now, domestically, on top of the global slowdown, we have to grapple with the lingering implications of state capture. So, Honorable Chair, all these factors mean that we have no choice but to find innovative paths to grow and invest. None of us can afford to fall back into complacency or hope to keep doing business the way we used to do. Rather, we need to identify new roads to building our economy, diversifying into new activities that can create employment, support new businesses, and accelerate growth. That in turn means that we have to find financing mechanisms that can mobilize all our national resources to build our economy.
Honorable Njayesa uyaye kuthiwe ongekho akekho nesisu sakhe. Kodwa ngoba nakho ke usobuyile neCope ayikho lapha endlini. Sesawufaka lapha endaweni kaCope. Honorable Njayesa, you can take the podium.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. I do apologize for that misbehavior because I was called upon and I was not in. Chairperson, Patrick Counts is a financial journalist for the Money Web. To use an oxymoron, Patrick's article in The Citizen a week ago about asset prescription is a dark light. He described prescribed assets as the practice of government forcing pension funds to allocate a portion of their portfolios to specific investments like government or parastatal bonds. What Brett doesn't say, however, is that asset prescription is regulated in our law. To be specific, Regulation number 28 of Pension Funds Act sets out the parameters for prescribing assets and to whom they may be prescribed. Chairperson, not only is Regulation number 28 granular about the parameters under which assets may be prescribed, it also makes it a requirement for a fund and its board, before making a contractual commitment to invest in a third-party managed asset or investing in an asset, to perform reasonable due diligence, take into account risks relevant to the investment, including but not limited to credit, market, liquidity risk, and as well as operational risks for assets not listed on an exchange. Chairperson, enormity of the responsibilities replaced under the fund's director's discredited fears about investment returns from the SOEs. Section 162 of Companies Act allows errant directors to be declared delinquent. As a result, any attempt to prescribe assets will be done in a manner set out in the law. We must never underappreciate the fact that while SOEs have performed badly in the recent years, the possibility of prescribing assets to further socio-economic and infrastructure development remains unimpeachable. Our economy is stagnant, with signs of depressive low growth, increasing expenditure, and low revenue gains. Chairperson, unlike quantitative easing, the IC supports the prescription of assets. We find it ironic that the people who are opposed to the prescription of assets as an ideal socio-economic stimulus are the cheerleaders of sovereign wealth fund. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Hendricks.
Honorable Chair, the correction by the Honorable Minister of Police just increases our thanks for the hospitality given by African countries by providing a home for those responsible for the freedoms we enjoy today in South Africa. Zambia provided a home for freedom fighters to give birth there, and the corrections help us to remember our unsung heroes. Honorable Hill Lewis, the country is indebted to you for bringing this matter to the nation's attention. Pension fund contributions should attract the best returns available on the market. However, Al-Jamaah don't agree with you that extending the basket of prescribed asset amounts to theft. Pensions will not have a quarrel that investments has a social and job creation and a universal health component whose benefit is greater than the slight reduced returns. Honorable Lewis, you don't share with the House the checks and balances when it comes to investment choice and the involvement of employees in how their monies are invested. This, however, needs to be strengthened in the light of the warning that you have issued. What is more worrying is that too many clipping fees reduce investment returns for pensioners, and many people will argue that that is stolen by the captains of industry. There should be no clipping fees. An investment prescribed asset must only get pensioners' contributions if next generation jobs can be clearly identified as a consequence of that investment. Investments in prescribed assets must only be made if the prescribed assets generate new revenue streams. There must be a component in which pension funds benefit from a share of sales revenue and profit sharing before dividends are declared. But I think that it's important that this matter has been brought to the attention of the nation.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Mazone.
Thank you, House Chairperson. State-owned entities pose a very serious risk to the fiscus, Finance Minister Tito Mboweni said. Allow me to quote from a section of the budget speech delivered earlier this year. Funding requests for SAA, SABC, Denel, Eskom, and other financially challenged state-owned enterprises have increased, with several requesting state support just to continue operating. Isn't it about time that the country asks the question, do we still need these enterprises? Mboweni asked the National Assembly. Indeed, Minister, do we still need these enterprises? Government guarantees to state companies are at more than 450 billion rand. That's just over $36 billion. This, according to the National Treasury data. The state's exposure to this increased by 64.5% in the past fiscal year, from 54.4% as companies drew in on their guarantees. According to a statement made by the South African Reserve Bank, and I quote again, financial stability centers around the ability of state-owned entities to roll over debt and achieve financial consolidation. Should state-owned entities fail to roll over the debt, the government would be liable and might not be able to honour such debt. The Minister of Public Enterprises, Pravin Gordhan, announced in Parliament in June this year that a lender would pay the remaining 15% of salaries owing to Denel employees, as Denel was only able to pay 85% of its staff that month. This was merely a temporary bandage for an entity that, quite frankly, is on the brink of collapse. This unidentified lender is not a get-out-of-jail-free card, but a temporary reprieve. Today, I sat in on the Standing Committee on Appropriations. Chairperson of ESCOM, Mr. Jabu Mabuza, said something that I found astonishing. He said, pray for luck to keep the lights on. This from an entity that has been hollowed out by state capture, and wait for it, has a debt of over 440 billion rand and counting. Now, someone said to me one day, you know, we're so used to talking about billions that we forget the concept of how much a billion is. Well, to put it in context, if you started counting the seconds now, it would take you over 32 years to count to a billion. Let that sink in. South Africa has hundreds of state-owned entities. Many of them are either completely dysfunctional, bankrupt, or frankly serve no purpose whatsoever other than the lining of the pockets of the connected few. Many of the hundreds of state-owned entities also duplicate functions and should simply not exist. They are sucking money from the fiscus and pose a great threat to the South African economy. From bailouts to guarantees, here's just a slight glimpse at the frightening state of state-owned entities. South African Airways debt, 21.7 billion rand. Denel's debt, 3 billion rand, with 2 bonds due in September totaling 2.7 billion. And ESCOM's debt, 440 billion, 610 million. State-owned entities are archaic in their design. They should not be being used for economic development. It simply does not work. The economy should be growing through and supporting a free market system. This would give South Africans choice, it would give South Africans opportunity, and it would create a conducive environment for national and international investment. When the money is finished, the money is finished. It is very easy for billionaires to make bold statements that government employees' pension fund is taxpayers' money anyway. 3.5 million South Africans have worked diligently their whole lives as civil servants and now face the risk of utter destitution in their old age because the government wants their pensions to bail out failing state-owned entities. It is very easy to be a socialist with other people's money. It is very easy to have communist leanings when the millions of rands that you deal with are not your millions. The fact of the matter is this. It is our job to be the custodians of the South African coffers. Simple economics dictates that you cannot spend more than you have without dire consequences. You cannot grow an economy when you are held ransom by unions who cripple state-owned entities when they feel that their demands aren't met. You cannot grow the economy when the energy supply is not secure. You cannot grow the economy by pouring billions and billions of rand into failing entities. Now is not the time to throw money at the problem. Now is the time to trim the fat. We cannot afford to continue with the status quo, where a government spends billions on bailing state-owned entities instead of spending the money on job creation initiatives and service delivery. It is time to be pragmatic and to stop playing politics. It is time to set political ideologies aside. State-owned entities represent some of the biggest monopolies in the South African economy. And by conducting a comprehensive review, government would be providing citizens with a clear indication that they are willing to start the process of structural change to protect our economy from further financial loss. We simply cannot be sentimental about state-owned entities. The country is in crisis. It therefore requires urgent reforms and the absolute protection of pension funds. This is nothing more than the new potential state capture. And mark my words, this battle too shall be fought and it shall be won.
Honorable Lesoma.
Honorable House Chairperson, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers present, Honorable Members, fellow South Africans, molweni. Ake ngidlulise la mphathistar. Awukwazi ukuthi iapple nobanana uyafana ngoba kwama-fruits. Kuyingxaki lokho. 2. Kuqale nini ukuba inkinga nxa sithi sizocwaninga siphenye sibheke ukuthi into ethile soyenza kanjani. Umbuzo ma South Africa fanele ibuze bona ukuthi lo onengxaki yini azoyizuza kubani ngoba kwenzeke njani. Hayi ningabalaleli odungamusi. Honorable vessels, just in passing, I am sure your great ancestors are angrily turning their heads, turning in their graves. Shame on you. You can't come here and rubbish and criticize the unions because you have written to them and they never listen to you because you want to maintain the status quo. It can't be like that. ACDP, your fears are very much premature. Just freeze them for now. We are still going to investigate very carefully and also soberly so. All what you are saying, DA, SADP, Freedom Front Plus, is the anti-ZIM syndrome, anti-developmental attitude, anti-job creation, anti-township development and villages economic transformation and growth. All what you need to do is to be shame on yourself. Honorable House Chairperson, the National Development Plan identifies one of the structural weaknesses of South African economy as the low level of savings and over-reliance of foreign capital to finance our investment. The NDP points out correctly that dependence on external capitals flows increasingly the risk of volatility and domestic economy. In responding to these challenges, the NDP, which the DA supports by the way, the ANC has presented the people of South Africa with its manifesto, which is overwhelming majority have agreed by voting us back, which we don't take it for granted. Thank you very much, fellow South Africans. In our manifesto, we raised 5 issues. I'll mention just a few. We will work tirelessly to increase the levels of investment by 1.2 trillion over the next 4 years. As part of our plan to grow the economy and create jobs, we are within our target. This investment will help densify the economy and sectors like mining, forestry, manufacturing, telecommunications, transport, energy, water, agro-processing, consumer goods, pharmaceutical and infrastructure, and financial services. Honorable House Chairperson, may I then just zoom in on the actual issue that the DA has got a challenge of, that we are saying we are going to investigate the introduction of prescribed assets on financial institutions fund to unlock resources for investment in social and economic development. To establish establish an infrastructure fund to finance key economic infrastructure projects. What informed by the ANC manifesto, which is a public document, by the way. The President has merely started a conversation on public and private sector compact to spur adequate growth and jobs for a benefit of all South Africans. But guess what? By the DA has decided to disrupt the momentum towards the national compact. The important question is why. We are not going to be intimidated by you and retreat from our manifesto commitments which we promised the fellow South Africans. The DA has long positioned itself as the shop steward of the rent seekers. Prescribed assets already exist, by the way. It has been said before me. And it will continue and it will stay and it will exist. Fellow South Africans, South African pension funds are subject to prescription under Section 28 of the Pension Fund Act of 1956. These regulations are made to guide asset management to be done in a manner that also promotes social economic objectives. that benefit the nation, but at the same time protect the investors such as pensioners and workers at the first instance. That limits us to an equity of 75%, by the way, listed property, 25% offshore assets, 30% hedge funds, 10%. The social compact requires a contribution from everyone. It will also need sacrifices and trade-offs. That is why we are going to investigate. It is upon the conduct of each and every one of us that the fate of all depends in. If we are to reinvigorate the implementation of NDP, we must cast our sights on the broadest horizons, which ANC is doing. The class-conscious organized workers in our country have said that South African banks and capital markets have been on an investment strike for decades. And as a result, the productive and mass job creation sectors of economy are in trouble. As we know, once the productive sector of the economy shrinks, real wages fall, leading to a fall in aggregate demand. Consequently, we witness economic stagnation, job losses, and chronic shortfalls in the collection of revenue by the state. If the state is unable to collect revenue on a scale that supports expenditure on provision of social services, health, education, social grants prescribed in Section 25 of the Bill of Rights, the consequence will be the crisis of social production we see not only in South Africa, but even the most developed capitalist countries such as the United States and Britain. Honorable House Chairperson, the DA is seeking to scare workers so that they do not act in their own interest. Allow me to remind the DA what the workers are, a progressive federation, have done in the recent past. Ubapalelile, bakuziba, usunantikutelo, hayi bane-right bayazibameleni abazukulalela wena. COSATU's intervention in ADCON deal was in the spirit of social compact and nation building. Here are valuable turnaround plan for ADCON was developed by ADCON in conjunction with the landlords and UIF that would both protect the 40,000 direct and 100,000 indirect jobs, but also ensure a turnaround for ADCON and a healthy return on investment to the depositors. That is why even in the PIC, the labor is going to be part of moving forward. You will never hear the DA objecting to the retirement fund being used to subsidize private capital. What the DA has a problem with is the use of our savings to develop our economy, particularly the township and the villages. Corporate lobbyists who operate freely in USA Congress have been able to frustrate efforts by progressive lawmakers to pass legislation on universal health coverage. You will be quiet, you listen to me at the end of the day. Education and infrastructure. Fortunately, the DA in South Africa is making noise, doesn't want to listen. The rent seekers who do not produce anything by able to accumulate obsessed level of wealth as speculators in the stock market reject investment in infrastructure, public services and education, and growth and development to the township and the villages and the rural areas. They do this because of our society invests in its own social economic development. They will lose some of the capital with which they have been gambling with. The phenomenon of analyzation of economy by monopoly bankers, coupled with the growing political power of investment fund managers, leads society to a form of reserve Robin Hood affair, moving money from the workers and the poor to the wealthy and well-fed. Put it differently, it is the case of moving investment funds from factory to the casino. As we know the logic of gambling, there are losers and few winners. Who are the losers? The majority of the fellow South Africans, the workers and the poor. Honorable House Chair, as the previous ANC speakers have said, the growth of financial sector from number 4 in 1994 to the second largest in our economy has been accompanied by widening inequality and deepening poverty. One of the success of Bantu education by our forefathers was its ability to convince many of us that black people black race, we do not have to know what is done with our retirement savings. Now we know. I wonder how many of us in this
Thank you
house...
very much, Honorable Member.
Thank you, House Chair. Just keep your motion.
Honorable Lewis.
What a joy it has been, Honourable Chairperson, to see the ANC, the EFF corralled together today, not just with each other, but with the party of apartheid. There must be some National Party gauleiters turning in their graves this afternoon, listening to this debate here, getting support from the likes of the EFF and the ANC. How wonderful irony is in South African politics. I forgot we were dealing with an ANC proposal today, but of course there is a party in this House with experience in stealing pensioners' savings. So of course it was most wonderful to hear them speaking in the debate and telling us about their experience, because of course when they see prescribed assets, they don't see 4 trillion rand in hard-earned savings, they see a 4 trillion rand VBS. And what a shiny prize that would be. You know, Honourable Abrams, you're completely confusing and contradictory. You listed a whole long list of PIC projects that have gone rather well. Well, isn't that the point? If the projects were worthy of investment, they would attract investment by themselves. They don't need prescribed assets to force pension funds to invest in them. It's a completely contradictory point. Now, you always ask us for positive contributions and suggestions. Let me make one. Let's do a pilot study on prescribed assets. Let's do a pilot study with all of your pensions. And we'll do that for 5 minutes. We'll do that for 5 minutes, and if you like the outcomes, we can talk about it.
Honourable members, order please. That concludes the debate on this subject. Can I get your attention, honourable members? Can I get your attention, honourable members? Thank you very much. Honourable members, on Thursday, the 11th of July, 2019, if only you can listen, honourable member, I'll really appreciate it. At the end of the minute plenary, I undertook to consider the Hansard and return to the National Assembly with a ruling I have now considered. During the debate on Public Service and Administration Budget Vote 10, the Honourable Kaula rose on a point of order and said, "Asinaye uRingo la, sino Honourable Ringo," which means we do not have Ringo here, we have Honourable Ringo. I then ruled that it was not a point of order, as Honourable Maneli spoke admirably of the Honourable Madlingozi when he said, at least as I was coming here, I was motivated because the ANC recognizes talent of South Africans. There is an esteemed South African that I listened to. His music, as I was coming here, was very motivating. Of course, that musician would be none other than Ringo. I like him, so went Honourable Maneli, and like this song, close open quotes, shut the tears and grow. Well, I don't know that. He makes the point that this thing will not just happen. He even quotes Bigo, that God is not in the habit of coming down to resolve our problems. In fact, he goes further to say that we teach the children not to take freedom for granted, close quotes. Honourable members, after several further points of order, I directed Honorable Maneli as follows. Honorable Maneli, I quote, if it happens that you refer to the name of a person, please respectfully do so. I now recognize, I close quotes, I'm sorry. I now recognize that the point of order of Honorable Kaula was indeed a valid point of order. Whether the honorable member has a stage persona or is a celebrity whose celebrity name is fondly raised by people who love and follow him, as honorable members, we should refer to each other in the House and in many plenary sessions respectfully as directed by Rule 82, subsection 1. You will also remember that at the time I had indeed directed the Honorable Maneli to do so, I also recognize that Honorable Maneli offered the Honorable Madlingozi an apology when he resumed his speech. There is therefore no further need to direct him in this particular regard. Thank you very much, honorable members. We now come to the motions without
On
notice.
order, Chair, can you please clarify what is the judgment? Because you admit that he was referred to by his first name and it was wrong.
Can you come again, Honorable Shivambo?
I want to understand what you have just delivered now. What is it? What are you saying should happen?
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I was making a ruling, Honorable Shivambo, on the basis of what I said in that particular mini plenary. In that particular mini plenary, I said there was no point in order on what Makaula had said. But I am therefore correcting it now to say that Honorable Makaula was correct in what she was saying. That's what I'm saying.
In that case, can you then get the member who did that?
Can I request you not to engage in a dialogue, Honorable Shivambo?
Yes, it's a point of order to say that as per the rules,
Honorable Shivambo,
you must then instruct the member to stand up and apologize.
Honorable Shivambo,
what he did before. That is basic process.
Honorable
I
Shivambo,
understand you are new, but that is how we work here.
Come again? What did you say, Honorable Shivambo?
I said that.
What is it that you understand?
I said I understand that you are a new presiding officer, but the process of our work here is that when you have made a ruling, you must then instruct the member who did wrong to correct himself here in the House. It's part of the process. That is how the rules are read. You can consult if you're not sure about it. It will help you.
Thank you, Honorable Shivambo. But please take into consideration the fact of the matter that I might be new, but at times it doesn't take time to get to understand very simple things like this one, Honorable Shivambo. I have made a ruling,
Yes.
and that's how it's going to stand, Honorable Shivambo.
Yes.
It might be difficult for you to understand what I'm saying. Thank you very much.
Point of order, Chairperson.
If you continue with that, I'm going to switch off your mind.
But I'm raising a point of order. I'm not even disrupting you.
I'm not prepared to take dialogue with you.
Don't panic, relax, we'll guide you properly. Now, the process.
Honorable Shivambo, could you please take your seat? Could you please take your seat? That's how it works. Thank you, honorable members. Shall we continue? Why are rising, honorable members?
Just to correct what is happening in this House. Honorable House Chairperson, the member on that day in the mini plenary apologized. We just want to Honorable Madlingos. He apologized. So we thank you for your ruling, and there's no need for us to debate it here in this house now, because we know that a ruling of the presiding officer cannot be challenged when that is made. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member.
On a point of order, Chair.
Why are you rising, Honourable Member?
Chair, if the member have apologized in the mini plenary, as you are saying, why are you raising it now here? Because then the matter would have been settled. Because the ruling is that that member must stand up and apologize here. And that is how we have worked all along in the first parliament. Unless you are telling me now, we are bending the rules.
Thank you very
because
much.
it's Honorable Ringo and it's an EFF member. Then I can also call you by name and apologize on the corner, if that is the case. Can we please follow the rules to the T?
Honorable
He
House
didn't apologize, we were
Thank you
there.
very much,
He
Honourable
never
Member.
apologized. We were there.
Honorable House
We want the
Chairperson.
apology here.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Honorable House Chairperson, just to assist the House, the ruling is not about the Honorable Maneli. It's about the chairperson who agreed on that day that the Honorable Kaula was out of order. So that is why the chairperson is clarifying for the mistake that he did on that day. Thank you.
Honourable members, thank you very much. Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Shivambo.
Chair, appreciating the fact that you are novice in these things, can we then give you an opportunity to revisit the same ruling that you have made? Go and consult properly, and then you come back, because I can tell you now that at the end of the day, if the member has done something wrong, and then the point of order that was raised by Honorable Kaula was correct, then the member must be instructed to apologize here. But if you are not satisfied with that, let us give you an opportunity, benefit of the doubt. We do that with all new presiding officers. You will get to understand it later properly.
Thank you, Honourable Members. We have to exhaust this thing now. Honourable Members, it's not Honourable Maneli who has to apologize. I am apologizing on the basis of the ruling that I made, not Honourable Maneli. However, if members are not happy with the ruling that I have made, they know what processes to follow. You can take it to the Speaker will refer it further. That's how we close it. Thank you very much.
Chair, they're on record. We're going to then take you through the process.
I did not recognize you, Honourable Fribambo.
But I spoke.
No. Come. Honourable members, we now come to motions without notice. Does any member of the ANC wish to make a motion without notice?
Thank you, House Chair. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House knows with great sadness the passing on of former President of Zimbabwe, President Robert Mugabe, at the age of 95. That the House recalls that the one-time school teacher was a leading political driver of the 1970s independence war that ended white minority rule in Zimbabwe. That the House acknowledges that he is an icon of liberation, a Pan-Africanist who dedicated his life to the emancipation and empowerment of his people. Understands that after leaving then Fort Hare University, where he was introduced to politics, he founded ZANU Party in 1963 and was jailed the same year for calling for the violent overthrow of Ian Smith's white minority government. Believes that his contribution to the history of Zimbabwe and the African continent and the world will never be forgotten, and conveys its condolences to his wife, Mrs. Grace Mugabe, family, and the people of Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Honourable members, if there are no objections, I put the motion. Is there an objection? The motion is objected, so it will be converted into a notice of a motion.
On a point of order, Chair.
Yes,
Can
Honourable
we
Member.
please just follow the rules? That member knows he must take the mic and stand up and object like that. Can we please follow the rules?
No, I've noted the objection, Honourable
No,
Member.
but he must take the mic and it must be on Hansard.
Thank you.
Can he please do that?
The DA? The DA?
Thanks, House Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes that the Ndlovu Youth Choir, a group of young people from Mwadze in Limpopo, has once again made South Africa proud by securing a spot in the finals of America's Got Talent TV show. Further notes that the choir has consistently received accolades from the panel of judges for their unique and energetic rendition of pop classics. Recognizes that the choir has had a profound impact on the lives of its choristers since its inception. Further recognizes that the choir has demonstrated to all of us that every South African has the potential to achieve excellence despite their background, education, or place of birth. Acknowledges the sacrifices made by and hard work of the choristers and the choir's director in preparing for their world-class performances. Conveys our congratulations to the Ndlovu Youth Choir and its director and wishes them well for the finals of the America's Got Talent competition. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The EFF?
House Chair, I rise on behalf of the economic freedom fighters for the House to note that on the 6th of September, the doyen of the African Revolution, a revolutionary, a fearless leader, produced by the African Anti-Colonial Liberation Movement, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, the former president of the proud Zimbabwean Republic, transitioned to the world of the ancestors. Further to note that Robert Mugabe was a staunch Pan-Africanist, a principled revolutionary with unflinching commitment.
Point of order.
Why are you rising, Honourable Member?
The point of order, House Chair, is that a motion that is similar in substance to one that has either been accepted or rejected by the House may not be removed again. I would submit this is a motion very similar to the one that has just been rejected, and therefore it falls foul of the rule.
Honourable members, I've just checked now with the table. The motions were circulated. I'll allow the member to read, and then you can object when the time comes.
House Chair, I've been interrupted here.
Continue, Honourable Member.
Yes, I'm going to start from the scratch.
Now, Honourable Member, order, Honourable Members, order. Honourable Member, just continue, please.
For this House to acknowledge that he stands...
Order, Honourable Members, I can't hear the member.
Robert Mugabe stands head and shoulders above the rest in his commitment to resolve the timeless question of the return of the African land back to the African people, of the use of African wealth for the development of Africa. The fast-track land reform program in Zimbabwe remains a lodestar of all those still fighting for the return of the land. Further acknowledges that in his lifetime, he faced unimaginable attacks from the West for daring to return African land, and for that he survived sanctions and isolation from the world, and Zimbabwe was punished for daring, for redefining itself as a sovereign nation. Further to note that despite the coordinated media propaganda which seeks to demonize Mugabe, African people know who their heroes are and shall not be told by descendants of European migrants who massacred and killed our people in this country and elsewhere in Africa. Send our condolences to the family of Robert Mugabe and to the people of Zimbabwe for whom Mugabe gave his life for. And we as the EFF call upon the ancestors to find space among the gallery, the galaxy of African stars of heroines and heroes to welcome and receive Robert Gabriel Mugabe and convey our message to all of them and say we'll continue with the struggle.
If there are no objections, I put the motion.
Honourable Chairperson, we object.
Yes. I've noted the objections, both of the DA and the Freedom Front Plus. The motion is thus not agreed to. The ANC.
Honourable Chairperson, the African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes the launch of the National Arbor Month campaign on Sunday, the 1st September 2019. Further notes that the National Arbor Month is an annual campaign coordinated by the National Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries and the Department of Environmental Affairs in partnership with Total South Africa. Acknowledges that this year's campaign falls under the theme Forests and Sustainable Cities. Also acknowledges that the Arbor Month campaign affords the department and other stakeholders the opportunity to undertake major national awareness program which emphasizes the value of trees and creating awareness of tree species that are threatened by extinction. Further acknowledges that the campaign promotes awareness for the need to plant and maintain indigenous trees throughout South Africa, especially for the many disadvantaged communities who often live in barren and water-stressed areas, and call on all of us to contribute to the awareness campaign in our communities. So I move. Thanks.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objection agreed to. The IFP.
Thank you, Chairperson. On behalf of the Nkara Freedom Party, I move without notice that this House notes that a massive fire broke out a few weeks ago at the Metallica Chemicals factory in the Cato Ridge area in KwaZulu-Natal. Further notes that the fire resulted in the contamination of the Mngweni stream, which flows into the Mngeni River, which eventually flows into the ocean. Recognizes that the Mngeni River is the main water source for communities living around KwaXimba in Cato Ridge outside Durban. Further recognizes that both people and animals have been affected by the elevated levels of mercury now present in the water. And finally calls on the Ministries of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs and Environmental Affairs to conduct a full investigation on the effect this has on the environment and on the affected communities, as well as to provide immediate assistance where necessary. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections agreed to. Freedom Front Plus. The ANC.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I rise on behalf of the African National Congress to move without notice that the House notes with great sadness the passing on of former Springbok and Rugby World Cup winner Chester Williams at the age of 49. Believes that Chester Williams was one of the heroes of the 1995 winning Rugby World Cup team, a tournament that the Springboks participated in for the first time. Recalls that the Springbok winning of the 1995 Rugby World Cup saw a unification of all South Africans as a first of its kind since the advent of democracy in our country. Further recalls that Williams played 27 games for the Springbok and scored 14 tries. Understand that he was the coach of the University of Western Cape rugby team, which took part in the Varsity Cup competition for the first time this year. Believes that he has left an indelible footprint in the rugby fraternity, and his contribution to the development of South Africa rugby will be forever remembered, and conveys his condolences to his family, colleagues in the rugby fraternity. So I move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections agreed to. The ACDP.
Thank you, House Chair. On behalf of the African Christian Democratic Party, I move without notice that the House notes with regret and sadness the passing away of 23-year-old Natasha Connebier. She was allegedly kidnapped 3 weeks ago and was dropped off outside her home on Sunday morning, alive but unconscious. Her family rushed her to hospital, but sadly, she did not survive. Further, the ACDP wishes to note that this House acknowledges that the recent attacks on women and children are almost unprecedented and must be stopped by the collaborative efforts of our criminal justice system and other stakeholders. And furthermore, we offer our condolences and prayers to the entire family, relatives, and close friends of Natasha Konabia. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The NFP.
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. On behalf of the National Freedom Party, I move without notice that this House notes that yet another police officer, Constable Finger, was murdered in Delft on Sunday, the 8th of September, 2019. Further notes that two other police officers, Jan Nieuwenhuis, 49, had 25 years of service and was due to retire at the end of the year, and Officer Tembile Nyangiwe, 43, was a father of 3 children, and the youngest was only 11 months, were murdered in Philippi on Wednesday. Also notes that in the last year, 27 more names were added to the number of killed police officers. Whereas we call on this Honourable House to extend condolences to the bereaved families, further calls for attack on police officers to be prioritized as it is tantamount to treason, also calls for this House to consider legislative amendments to ensure that those found guilty receive maximum sentencing. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The UDM.
House Chair, I move without notice on behalf of the United Democratic Movement that the House notes that on Monday, the 2nd of September 2019, the Sports and Recreation, Arts and Culture MEC in the Eastern Cape launched Heritage Month and stag parade at Kamega village, where dinosaur bones have been found. Further notes, this tiny village also made international headlines last year with the discovery of what is believed to be the largest dinosaur bone beds ever discovered in South Africa. Acknowledges that South Africa is home to 8 of the world's official heritage sites as determined by the United Nations, and underscores the need to ensure and value our cultural heritage as we enter the Heritage Month. Further acknowledges that this discovery could create employment opportunities for locals, particularly the youth and women who are still economically active, as this has the potential to turn this area into a major tourism destination. Calls on the provincial heritage resource authorities, together with the district, local municipalities and universities and all stakeholders, to work together in the development of the Jurassic Park venture at the unique Kamega fossil discovery site. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The DA.
Thank you, House Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes that Carla Pretorius, one of the senior members of the Republic's women's netball team, was named Player of the Year in the 2019 Netball World Cup on the 21st of July 2019. Further notes that the team achieved an impressive 4th place in the World Cup hosted in the United Kingdom. Acknowledges that Ms. Pretorius has been a central figure in the recent transformation of netball as a professional sporting code in the Republic and has become widely recognized since making her international debut in 2011. Recognizes the opportunities that netball can create for girls and women to develop their highest sporting abilities and compete at international level. Supports the efforts of the national team and netball fraternity, including at school level, to develop the sport, and congratulates Ms. Pretorius and wishes her well with her future endeavors. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The EFF.
Thank you very much, House Chair. I rise on behalf of the economic freedom fighters to move without notice for the House to note that black farmers across the country, with specific reference to farmers in the Retuseridire cooperative in Taung, are operating in an area of 1054 hectares under sprinkler irrigation without consistent water supply or any form of support from government in the current planting season. Also for the House to acknowledge that black farmers contribute to food security in the country. And without water, their various crops, plantations will be a failed exercise. Also to recognize that they rely on an old infrastructure that has not been maintained and continue to dilapidate because of neglect. Effectively, it means farmers are losing between 4 to 6 tons of production, which amounts to about 26,000 rand that could have went to their income at the end of the harvesting season. We must also recognize government has failed to revitalize irrigation scheme all over the country. And this has affected and will continue to affect food security. Also for the House to understand that the land reform fails because black people are given land without post-settlement support of fertilizers, tools, tractors, and marketing and distribution of their produce. And we call on the Portfolio Committee on Agriculture, Land and Rural Development, together with the Portfolio Committee on Water, to investigate the scale of failing irrigation scheme due to lack of water and a clear program on what is to be done. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion.
The African National Congress vehemently objects.
Your objection is noted. The motion is thus not agreed to. The ANC.
House Chair, on behalf of the ANC, I move that the House note the recent launch of integrated government program under the auspices of the 2019 Public Service Month, acknowledges that this year's theme is Kauleza, taking people service to the people, but to Pili, we belong, we care, we serve. Further acknowledges that this theme is based on the aspirations of the 6th administration as pronounced by His Excellency President Ramaphosa during his State of the Nation address. Recognizes that this integration brings together the celebrations of heritage, environment, and tourism, since all these fall within the September month, and call on all citizens to participate in these celebrations. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. There is an objection. The motion is not agreed to. And the next two parties have indicated that they don't have motions to move. I will thus go back to the ANC.
Thank you, House Chair. On behalf of the ANC, I rise to move on the following motion without notice, celebrating Terry Feto on winning Best Actress Award in London, that the House congratulates the South African actress Terry Feto on winning the Best Actress Award at the annual British Urban Film Festival Awards on Saturday, 7 September 2019 in London. Notes that the film for which she has won an award also won the section of Best Feature Film. Further notes that Peto's latest Best Actress Award adds to the list of prestigious awards that she has won internationally. We thank Terry Peto for being a global heroine and a true ambassador for our country. We wish her well in her future endeavors. We thank Terry Peto for continuing to fly the South African flag high. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections agreed to. The ATM.
On behalf of the ATM, I move without notice that the House knows that Thandi Mampane went missing on Thursday after leaving school grounds. Further notes that her body was discovered in the bushes a day later with a suspicion that she may have been sexually assaulted before she was murdered. Further notes that similar cases of school snatches, abductions, and kidnappings have been noted with concern. Sends condolences to the Mampane family. Calls for the introduction of a justice-based capital punishment system in response to the plight of women in South Africa who undergo this struggle on a daily basis. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections agreed to. The AIC.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I hereby move, without notice, on behalf of African Independent Congress, that this House notes the outstanding initiative taken by the University of Cape Town to establish the Win and Mkhwechana Scholarship for Women in Humanities Studies. That is Dr. Mamukete Pakeng's visionary leadership at UCT has gone a great length to inspire confidence and hope in the entire African diaspora. Further, to recognize the legacy that Win Mkhwechana lives in the broader higher education fraternity, especially her creation in youth scholarship, which will benefit many women on our shores. To note the concerted effort to empower young women in their kith and kin by institutions such as UCT Vets and many others. Further, to encourage young women to seize the moment and claim stake in the Union Mkhwechana Scholarship. It is the time that our women take advantage of this opportunity. As William Shakespeare puts it clear, I quote, "There is a tide in the affairs of men, which, when taken on time, leads on to fortune," close quote. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The ANC.
Ndolibuwa muhulisei Mulangadzulo. The African National Congress moves without notice that the House notes with sadness the death of 7 people following a head-on collision on the road 345 between King Williamstown and Sutterham on Thursday, 5th September 2019. We recall that 4 people died at the crash scene, while 3 others were transported to hospital for medical attention, but later died. We understand that a buggy collided head-on with a sedan, resulting in this fatal accident, and further understand that the sedan was traveling from Sutterham towards King Williamstown, and the buggy was traveling in the opposite direction. We call upon drivers to observe South African road safety rules and regulations. And the ANC conveys its heartfelt condolences to the families of the deceased. I so moved.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The DA.
Thank you, House Chair. I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that this House notes with sadness the passing of Mrs. Adeline Hayne, the anti-apartheid and civil rights activist at the age of 92 on the 8th of September 2019. Further notes that Mrs. Hayne, born in Port Alfred, left South Africa in 1966 following years of being imprisoned, detained, banned, and ultimately exiled, first to the United Kingdom and later to Australia. Recognizes the suffering inflicted on opponents of the apartheid state by the government of the day, including banning orders that restricted its victims physically, socially, and professionally from exercising free speech, expression, and association. Further notes that Mrs. Hayne and her husband Walter were members of the South African Liberal Party until the banning orders officially stopped their political activism, although their activities continued underground at great personal risk to themselves. Acknowledges that her tireless campaigning against the apartheid regime, even while in exile, included vocal opposition in the media, where as a journalist attending Madiba's 1962 treason trial, she demonstrated her support for him with a raised fist of greeting each morning, always returned by our future president. Further acknowledges that her activism in promoting the sporting boycott against apartheid South Africa resulted in the cancellation of the 1970 cricket tour to the United Kingdom and ultimately contributed to the social, economic, and political pressure that led to the end of apartheid, and extends our deepest condolences to Mrs. Hayne's family, and especially to her son, Pretoria-born anti-apartheid activist Lord Peter Hayne, who also followed the example of his parents in fighting for the freedoms all South Africans enjoy today. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections, agreed to. The PAC. Al-Jamaa.
Honorable House Chair, on behalf of Al-Jamaa, we move without notice that the House notes the importance of protecting our waterways, streaming into our oceans while passing livestock horses, and homesteads. Further notes that the poisonous chemicals, especially from water sewage treatment plants, entered the waterways in spite of the best endeavors from municipalities, and that these poisonous chemicals destroy or harm more than 60% of our marine life. Further calls on the South African government and the Blue Scorpions to take the lead to fight these chemical poisons in our waterways from sewage treatment plants, as research is largely ignored by the international community, while scientists consider the harm worse than climate change. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. There's no objections, the motion is agreed to. The ANC.
Thanks, Honorable House Chair. On behalf of the African National Congress, I move without notice that the House congratulates Thebe Magugu for winning this year's LVMH Prize for Young Fashion Designers at the Foundation Louis Vuitton in Paris with a prize money of 300,000 euros. Recalls that his interest in fashion design began when he was in grade 4. Further recalls that Magugu first came to the local fashion world's attention when he showed his first collection at the South African Fashion Week, the country's premier platform for designers, in 2017. Acknowledges that he has since become one of the most sought-after designers represented internationally by the South African Fashion Week affiliated agency, the Fashion Agent. Thanks, Thebe Magugu, for flying the South African flag high in the international fashion arena, and wishes him well in his future endeavors, especially his desire to contribute in job creation projects in South Africa. I so move.
If there are no objections, I put the motion. No objections agreed to. That concludes motions without notice. The next item of the order paper is member statements. Does any member of the ANC wish to make a statement?
The African National Congress welcomed the 5th senior official meeting between Bangladesh and South Africa, which was held in Dakar on the 3rd September 2019. Some of the positive outcomes of this meeting is that both sides expressed satisfaction over the positive evolution and intensification of the bilateral relationship between the two countries. It further bodes well that this year marks 25th anniversary of the establishment of the diplomatic relationship between Bangladesh and South Africa. Recent political and economic developments in Bangladesh and South Africa were covered as well on issues of visa waiver for diplomatic and official passport holders, further cooperation of agriculture, forestry and fisheries, education, academic, scholarship and fellowship, training and governance, transport-related matters, air service, and climate change. The African National Congress further welcomes the fact that both the countries explore possibility of further strengthening contact, sector-wise cooperation and exchange between the two countries. Thank you.
The DA.
The ANC is running out of excuses. This has been recently demonstrated by ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule. He's been accused of widespread corruption before the Zondo Commission and even had a book called Gangster State written about his multiple misdeeds as Free State Premier. He threatened to sue the author, but has remained strangely silent ever since. 4 years ago, a parliamentary committee released findings of a probe into xenophobic violence. Since then, the ANC has failed to tackle its causes. As the ANC-led economic collapse continues, those causes have ever greater effect as our people get more desperate. Because he can't excuse this failure, Magashule now makes the suggestion that xenophobic violence should rather be directed against white people. This is the merest hair's breadth away from a call to racial violence. It is completely against the compact on which our Constitution was founded. It is a dangerous escalation of rhetoric which may have consequences in violent crime and civic unrest. Magashule is a member of the ANC's inner circle, which they call the Top Six. Now, in this House, the ANC can tell the country whether or not Ace Magashule speaks for his organization. And if they say he doesn't, Why is he still a member of the top 6?
The EFF.
Thank you, Chair. Zone 20 Phase 1 is an RDP area located in Sebokeng Ward 2 of Emfuleni local municipality. The houses were built in the 1990s with foundations as ngekho proper, with most houses built extremely closer to each other. Neighbors have started to turn against each other. They are fighting over yards and passages. Both local municipality of Emfuleni and the Gauteng provincial government are fully aware of this horrible situation. Fully aware that this was also built in a landfill site, and as a result, it is infested with snakes. But they are also fully aware that even the used hospital equipment still gets to be dumped in the area, exposing residents to extreme health and environmental risk. Furthermore, there are conflicting messages regarding the allocation of the budget that was meant for demolition of some of these houses, rebuild them at an already identified piece of land to ensure that people get enough spaces and yards. Having a dignified funeral or traditional ceremony in Zone 20 is a mission. There is no space at all. There is no clarity whether the budget was released or not, and if yes, how much was it? We hope and trust that the Minister will take this opportunity to properly respond and commit that this matter will receive the full attention it deserves. We are disgusted by the conduct of the ANC in being comfortable enough in treating our people in this manner. I mean, you can literally see outside when you are inside, through the cracks of the walls. This is Zone 20. So giving them small houses as if it was not enough,
expired.
let our people be respected. Thank you.
The ANC.
The ANC today celebrates this day, 10 September 1994, the launching of the ANC Youth League at Bantu Men's Conference Center in Johannesburg. Anton Lembete was elected first president. The National Executive Committee elected in that Congress included William Nkomo, Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Pimta, Robert Resha, Robert Sobuke, Mxolisi Machombosi, Oliver Tambo, Lillian Ngoyi, Tumanok, and Dentlom. The ANC Youth League was formed to supplement, consolidate, and give new impetus to the struggle against racial oppression as championed by the ANC. Emphasis was placed on African nationalism, which affirmed the role of Africans as their own liberators within South Africa and abroad. The African nationalism espoused by the ANC Youth League did not imply reverse racism, but emphasized the emancipation of Africans as the primary focus of political engagement, and its manifesto of 1994. For us to daily understand the character of today's youth as a dynamic social construction, our youth renew and development process government officially use modern technology towards the fourth industrial revolution to strengthen a united South African youth and wage war against alcohol abuse, drug abuse, rape, exclusion of youth in the economy, gender-based violence, femicide against women and children in schools, institutions of higher learning, at homes, churches, streets of South Africa, and youth unemployment. Fight, produce, and learn. We are proud of our past, confident of our future. RIP President Mugabe.
The IFP.
Thank you, Chairperson. South Africa faces an unprecedented challenge with regards to tobacco industry and the contribution it makes to our country. This is the prevalence of illicit cigarettes in South Africans' market. They now make up to 42% of the formal tobacco market as at the beginning of this year. These illicit cigarettes are not a myth, and they are easily accessible in every corner shop in our country. The South African Revenue Service lost about 8 billion in taxes due to illicit cigarette trade and consumption in 2018. The prevalence of illicit tobacco brand potentially puts 12,000 direct jobs at local tobacco leaf farms at risk. There needs to be a political way to clamp down on the illicit trade of cigarettes in our country, since government is fully aware of this but seem not to be doing anything about it. We call for the comprehensive tobacco control measures to be further instituted to deal with this problem. Thank you.
The Freedom Front Plus.
Malcolm X instructed his audience to ask them who taught them to hate themselves. And he was right, because self-hatred is not only destructive, it is also unnatural. And the future of Africa will depend on the pride that Africans take in who we are. En teen daardie agtergrond, agbare adjunct speaker, wil ek verwys na die onderwerping van Afrikaans in die Afrikaanse universiteite van ouds, waar Pretoria 'n stad met omtrent 1 miljoen Afrikaans sprekendes is, maar die Universiteit van Pretoria mag van die begin van hierdie jaar af nie 'n enkele lesing in Afrikaans aanbied nie. Om die waarheid te sê, in Tuks Res word Afrikaans verban vir enige aankondigings, vergaderings, byeenkomste of kennisgewings in tikkies koshuise waar Afrikaanse studente woon. Dit is nie transformasie nie, dit is ook nie nasiebou nie, dit is onderdrukking. Dit is kulturele onderdrukking en die grondlegger van die Britse Ryk sou trots gewees het op die ANC se ywer vir Engels. Nou het baie agbare lede my al gevra, wat maak julle in Orania? Ek wil vir julle sê, we are creating a new reference point for our people. We are undoing the damage
Honourable
done by
Member,
our
your time
oppressors,
is now expired.
and we are undoing self-hatred.
The UDM.
Mhlali ngaphambili. Sithi thina iyasothusa into yoba ngeli xesha kanye abantu abangootata baseMzantsi Afrika benesimilo esinesiphene esinebala likantsholo ukuthi babe nodlame nodushe kubantu abangoomama, ufumanisa ukuthi ii-institutions of higher learning okanye amaziko ezifundo zamabanga aphezulu ezifana nee-universities ezifana nee-forte zibe kanti kwasona njengoba zifanele zikhokela uMzantsi Afrika kwimiba efana ne-public policy ezi-intellectuals ze-country, ufumanisa ukuthi kwasabona banazo kwa ezi policies. Kufuneka abafundi baziqhankqalazele ezi zinto bazilwele ukuze zenzeke ndaweni yokuba zona ezi universities zisikhokele. Uyakukhumbula ukuba nakule university yalapha Western Cape kwakunjalo, kufuneke abafundi baqale baqhankqalaze ukuze kwazi bakwenzeka into eyenzekayo. Ii-universities ezi nezinye intellectuals kwi-matters of public policy zifanele zisikhokele xa sizama ukusombulula ingxaki ezijongene noMzantsi Afrika. Siyabulela.
The ANC.
Thank you. The African National Congress commends the commitment by law enforcement officers in Durban, where 9 life sentences have been handed down to those who committed violent crimes against women and children during this month, or last month of August 2019. Other persons who were imprisoned to a total of 367 years of similar crimes. The Family Violence, Child Protection and Sexual Offences units in KZN have done a splendid job in ensuring that perpetrators face the law and receive the deserving sentences for their lawlessness. We call on all police units in all the provinces to intensify their investigations in crimes against women and children. A total of 327 suspects were arrested in sexual offences related cases and 42 convictions were secured last month. Other cases remain under investigations and on the court roll. One of the accused was sentenced to a total of 3 life sentences imprisonment for rape and other charges including murder, kidnapping and assault. The ANC-led government will intensify its commitment in fighting violence and crime in our country. I thank you.
ATM.
Thank you, Chair. It cannot be business as usual whilst almost 3 cases of gender-based violence are reported on a daily basis. Murders, heinous crimes have the country in complete disarray. Yet the House that has the means and actual power to put an end to this is taking minimal action. These are tough times. The nation needs leadership, and we are the leadership we need. Hence, the need for action is imminent on all pronounced cases. We have the capacity to combat crime proactively and not be reactionary as we previously have been. We have thousands and thousands of police reservists who are trained in the usage of firearms, but despite that, they hand them in at the end of the day. They also live in poor conditions that are not pleasing to the eye. Why are we not absorbing all of these reservists and strategically place them in high crime areas, public service such as schools, where you have seen the cases of kidnapping, clinics, hospitals, correctional services, We cannot stress this enough. Our nation has bled its last drop, and we are adamant that we are saying we heed and lead the call for the introduction of a justice-based capital punishment. Crime has taken a rise. Immoral humans are going around killing law-abiding citizens for fun. We cannot be held at ransom by lawless thugs, gangs, and criminals who know the justice
Honourable
system
Member, your time is now
will
expired.
protect them.
The ANC.
Thanks, Honourable House Chair. The ANC acknowledges that the economy of our country has not been growing at a faster pace and at the acceptable levels to allow it to create jobs, address poverty and inequality. However, the ANC is delighted with the announcement by the Statistics South Africa, which show that the economic performance was much more better in the second quarter than in the first quarter. This has been indicated in the gross domestic product figures released by Stats South Africa, which indicated that the economy grew by 3.1% from April to June 2019. This announcement by Statistics South Africa demonstrates that the government of the ANC is on the right recovery path after a difficult time and is on the road to recovery. The Stats SA figures is a promising sign of improved economic performance. The announcement has been good news, not just for the ANC government, but also its social partners. It also demonstrates renewed commitment and resolve to work collectively to grow the economy in order to tackle poverty, unemployment, and inequality. I thank you.
The DA.
Thank you, Chair. The DA believes that all municipalities and businesses who win municipal tenders should take note of the recent judgment of the North Gauteng High Court in the Tshwane broadband case. Shortly before the 2016 election, the city of Tshwane entered an 18-year, multi-billion rand contract for the construction of a broadband network. A majority of councillors, the ANC councillors in fact, approved the contract during the April 2016 council meeting. National and provincial treasuries had made adverse comments about the feasibility and legality of the contract, but these were not disclosed to councillors when they voted. Neither had public participation, as required by Section 33 of the Municipal Finance Management Act, taken place. In terms of the contract, ownership of the broadband network would only pass to the city after 18 years, a point at which the technology would probably be obsolete. During this period, the city would have incurred onerous duties and risks disproportionate to the benefits of the contract. The newly elected DA-led city government took the contract on judicial review in 2017, and last month, the High Court set aside the contract as unlawful and constitutionally invalid. The judgment is a victory for clean government and value for ratepayers' money, and a warning against unethical tender practices has become a way of life in ANC municipalities. I thank you.
The EFF.
The state of the National Hospital in Bloemfontein is shocking, embarrassing, and the Minister of Health, the MEC of Health, and officials in the department must just bury their heads in shame, because the patients in these hospitals are drinking contaminated water. They are bathing in cold water. The nurses wash their hands in dirty water. The nurses have to come with their own water from their own homes for them to drink in the workplace. And the very same nurses are expected to work in a clean and conducive environment when the same water that's meant to clean the place is already dirty. One of the many reasons why we have a completely collapsed health system is because we have failed to prioritize prevention and primary health care. And workers in the very same hospital have already reported this matter to the management. They've already reported this issue to the department, and yet there has been no intervention. In fact, the fact that the Minister of Health has not intervened to date is in fact proof that our suspicion and our view that there is a group of people who deliberately demand and wait for our hospitals to fail, for them to come and bring here misguided ideas on the NHI. There are people who depend on our people dying in public hospitals for them to make profit and money. In fact, we must just somehow resolve the fact that the ruling party must just say there must be a ministry of corruption so that you guys can just stop compromising our people and having to make money through the deaths of our people just so that you guys can make
Honourable
profit.
Member, your time
Thank
is now
you.
expired. The ANC.
Thank you, Chair.
Order, honourable members.
The efforts of the ANC government's plans to grow the economy through restoring investment.
Order, honourable members. Continue, honourable member.
The efforts of the ANC government's plans to grow the economy through restoring investor confidence in our economy is evident in the launch of one of the world's leading sachet manufacturers, ZF Lemfraude, South Africa, in his London's Industrial Development Zone on Tuesday, the 3rd of September 2019. The company produces the front and rear axles for its customer, Mercedes-Benz South Africa. The company wants to expand its international footprint by launching a new plant in East London, thus growing East London and the IDZ into a strong economic hub. The company further seeks to contribute to the creation of jobs in the supply chain industry and has employed 200 people and has another 100 learners on the payroll in its London plant. The company also has operations in Cape Town, Pretoria, Johannesburg, and Durban, with a combined total of 460 employees. The ANC calls upon other investors to follow suit and invest in South Africa and to introduce growth-enhancing reforms in key economic sectors in order for us to improve
Honourable
the
member, your
competitiveness-
time is now expired. Al-Jama.
A statement.
The ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson. The African National Congress welcomes the recent appointment of a task team of ministers that will work with civil society to deal with gender-based violence. The President of South Africa and his cabinet took this decision amid a countrywide outcry over unacceptably high levels of gender-based violence and femicide. The high rate of violence against women and children remains a grave concern, not just for the government, but its citizens as well. We call on our criminal justice system to be ruthless and firm in dealing with the perpetrators of women and child abuse. As the ANC, we share the President's grief and turmoil about the high rate of gender-based violence taking place in our country. We also welcome the commitment in his address to the nation recently to ensure that the criminal justice system made out harsher sentences against perpetrators of violence against women and children. I thank you.
The DA.
Thank you, Chair. On the 16th of June this year, 78-year-old Bets Purcell took a fall and badly broke her femur. She was rushed to the Ephraim Machali Hospital in Limpopo, where she was advised that the leg could not be cast but would require orthopedic surgery to fix. Twice, Mrs. Purcell was transferred to the Philadelphia Hospital, who were not equipped to treat her condition, and she was transferred back to Ephraim Machali. 5 times, she was transported to the Mankweng Hospital. On every occasion, she was told that there was either no bed or doctors to admit her, and was again referred to Ephraim Machali 3 hours away. On the 6th trip to Mankweng, DA MPs and MPLs were present on their arrival to make sure that she was admitted. This was after 7.5 weeks in excruciating pain. After 3 hours of lying on a gurney, she was eventually admitted and operated on 2 days later. So there's pain and trauma, the cost of 8 EMS vehicle trips of doctors and nurses. Apart from the wasteful expenditure, the department faces yet another malpractice suit. This is the health system the ANC is promising in its NHI. This is the treatment it wants for everybody. No wonder ANC members are shopping for healthcare in Singapore. I thank you.
The ANC.
The African National Congress welcomes the signing into law of the National Credit Amendment Bill into law by the President of the country. This is in line with our objectives of addressing the most significant obstacles that limit the pace of economic growth and intervening in favor of a more equitable growth path biased towards the poor and marginalized. This is a committee bill initiated following the consent by the Portfolio Committee on Trade and Industry that the current debt relief measures such as sequestration, debt administration, and debt review mechanism do not cover the poor with low income. However, these measures exclude poor and low-income debtors. The main objective of this act is to provide debt relief measures to poor South Africans who earn less than 7,500 rands per month, whose unsecured debt is not more than 50,000 and are over-indebted. I thank you.
Honourable members, that concludes member statements. Are there any ministerial responses? The Honourable Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, followed by the Honourable Minister of Trade and Industry, followed by the Deputy Minister of State Security, the Deputy Minister of Health, as well as the Deputy Minister of Agriculture and Land Reform. In that order, please.
Thank you, House Chairperson. We welcome the message with regard to the historic day of the formation of the ANC Youth League, and want to note that young people across the country came to this house in the various universities, and the Minister of Higher Education is going to meet various vice chancellors of the universities to review the various issues that young people are raising in campuses, including the safety, including issues that relate to the criminal justice system. And we are also responding to the member statements with regard to strengthening swift justice, and we are committing that the NPA is in the process of ensuring that the various gender-based violence matters are swiftly handled and with expeditious process for swift response and outcomes for the public. The NPA has also noted a 48% improvement since 2000 to 74% improvement on conviction to date on gender-based violence. And various life sentences have been meted out. We are also opening a new sexual offences court this Friday in Limpopo in response to this scourge. And 92 sexual offences courts have been reopened since 2013. This is in response to the realities of gender-based violence in our country, to respond swiftly, urgently, and with a modernized infrastructure that is needed for these purposes. Thank you.
Minister of Trade and Industry.
Thank you, House Chair, and thank you, Honourable Nkosi, for your comment on the Bangladesh bilateral relations. Last year, we exported 3 billion rands worth of goods to Bangladesh, and that was an increase of some 35%. Honourable members would be delighted to know that we sell a lot of citrus fruit, and we sell minerals like coal. We sold about R500 million of each of those. Honourable Skosana's comments on the GDP, while we welcome the positive news on the economy, we know that we need to do a lot more. And in particular, I wanted to highlight and point to the fact that mining expanded by 14% as my colleague Minister Mantashe comes in. And part of the growth was in coal, manganese, and of course iron ore. Honourable Hermans, on the Mercedes-Benz, thank you for your comment. You pointed to the expansion of axle production in East London as part of Mercedes-Benz. And I should just highlight that Mercedes-Benz made a commitment of 10 billion rand fresh investment in the investment conference that was held, convened by the President last year. This is an example of practical action to implement that. And finally, on Honourable Mantashe's comment of the National Credit Amendment Act, the Portfolio Committee this morning spent about 3 hours getting an update on where we are on implementation, some of the key issues, the rationale for the law, and so on. So thank you very much for those contributions.
The Deputy Minister of State Security.
On the comments made by members with regards to issues of crime and some of the incidences that happened in the recent past, Chairperson, there is no immediate threat to South Africa on its national security and constitutional order. There is no immediate threat. But however, there are issues that we need to attend to. There are issues that we need to attend to that border on the threat of social stability and social cohesion. Those issues have to do with the issue that was raised about basically the lack of fear of consequence of breaking the law, killing of police, doing everything that undermines the authority of the state. That is the biggest problem that we have, and I think we're attending to that issue. There's an issue about xenophobic and the fact that the government has not responded. The recent attacks we have seen, I don't think we must glorify them and give them any nice names. It's pure criminality. For an example, if you look at what happened in Ekurhuleni recently over the past, let's say, 3 days, we made this last week. The attack on the shops around the area of Katlehong, Sontonga Mall, there is no foreign national who owns any shop there. It's all South Africans. And therefore, it's important that when we make this, we do not, in our articulation, glorify this criminality. And we must speak in one language in terms of how we undermine and condemn this, this criminality. The last one is that there is no evidence before us that suggests that these recent incidences are acts of xenophobic attacks. The evidence before us, in fact, for example, we have 12 people who have died, 2 of which is foreign nationals, 10 is South Africans. And a number of incidences and shops that were looted in Johannesburg, which we spoke about last week, is nothing else but a competition of hawker market. Because what we have now identified is kingpins behind these attacks. When people attack a liquor store, there is a tavern owner who's readily available for them to sell. So there's a competition of a market that we're dealing with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Minister. Deputy Minister of Health.
Yeah, thanks, Chairperson. Let me reject with the contempt it deserves the exaggeration and sensational allegation by the EFF member claiming that all hospitals in the Free State have got dirty water and patients and nurses. This is absolute.
Order, honourable members, order.
This is an absolute exaggeration.
Honourable member, why are you rising?
On a point of order, Chair.
What is the point of order?
The Honourable, I understand you haven't been in Parliament
What is the point?
for a long time now. He can't reject a member statement. Our member were there doing oversight in that hospital. We have ample proof. After this, we're going to write to his office.
Thank you.
So he can't say that when last week.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Deputy Minister, will you continue?
Yes, thank you, Honourable Chair. Indeed, this is an extreme sensationalism. It does not even recognize the fact that on a daily basis, the claim that public health facilities have totally collapsed must be rejected. Or even if you go to the Free State and all other 9 provinces at the present moment, even if you step just out of Parliament here, you will find clinics in the Western Cape, in the other 9 provinces,
honourable members, order.
Clinics and hospitals which are treating
honourable members, honourable members, honourable members, order. Honourable members, a statement was made, the Deputy Minister is responding. You may not agree with him, but he's got the right to respond. Let's give him the right to respond.
Honourable Chair, it is a matter of fact that as we speak now, you can step out in any of the 9 provinces, in clinics, in hospitals, you will find hundreds and thousands of patients who are receiving treatment, attended to by many
honourable members.
Many dedicated public servants, doctors, nurses, health workers, who are saving lives as we are sitting here today. So I want to say to the people, to this sitting here, to the Honourable House, and to the people of South Africa who are using the health facilities, that the situation may not necessarily be perfect, but the services are being provided to the best of available resources. To the member of the DA about...
Order, honourable members.
To the DA member about the Philadelphia Hospital and Mankweng issue, we will look into that. We know that we are short of many specialties.
Honorable Deputy Minister, your time is now expired.
Thank you.
Deputy Minister of Agriculture, Rural Development, Land Reform. Deputy Minister Skwatsha. Order, honorable members. Order.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. It was on the Youth League. I am happy to emphasize if you want.
No, that statement has been responded to, Honorable Deputy Minister. Thank you. Honorable members, that concludes ministerial responses. Order. The last item on the order paper is notices of motion. Does any member of the ANC wish to give a notice of motion?
Thank you, House Chair. I move on behalf of the ANC that in its next sitting, the House debates the advancements of science, artificial intelligence, and the rapid growth of technological industry. Make it an undeniable fact that the fourth industrial revolution is underway.
The DA?
I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that in its next sitting, the House debates the intended rollout of comprehensive sexual education programs in public schools.
The EFF?
Thank you, Chair. I move on behalf of the EFF that in the next House sitting the year, we debate the collapse of ESCOM and the collapse of the IPPs. I so move.
The ANC? The ANC?
Thank you, Chairperson. I move on behalf of the African National Congress that in its next sitting, the House debates the availability of mentorship programs and skills development opportunities for women, especially black women in business, should be encouraged. Thank you.
The IFP?
Mhlonishwa sihlalo egameni leqembu lenkatha inkululeko ngiphakamisa ukuthi le ndlu ibuka udaba lokudayiswa kokugwayi okungemthetho okurobha izakhamuzi enteleni. Ngiyabonga.
The Freedom Front Plus?
Thank you, Chair. I hereby give notice on behalf of the Freedom Front Plus that the House at this next session debates the high mortality rate due to contributing circumstances in state hospitals, the high infant mortality in state hospitals, and the long waiting times and poor treatment that patients receive at state hospitals and clinics across South Africa as a contributing factor here too. Thank you, Chair.
The ANC?
Thank you, Chairperson. As the ANC, I move on behalf of the ANC that its next sitting, the House debates African countries needs to work together to promote peace and stability while addressing trade obstacles, climate change, corruption, cybersecurity, and the opportunities and challenges of the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you.
The ACDP?
The ACDP gives notice that at the next sitting of the House debates the impact of genetically modified organisms in the country, given the intention to introduce 3 new GM maize varieties announced earlier this year.
The NFP?
Thank you, Honourable House Chair. On behalf of the National Freedom Party, I move that at its next sitting, this House deliberates on the erection of a statue to honour the late Winnie Madikizela Mandela on the parliamentary precinct. I so move.
The UDM?
Thank you, House Chair. I move on behalf of the United Democratic Movement that at its next sitting, the House debates the need to develop legal and normative frameworks to deal and control migration in Africa. I so move. Thank you.
The DA?
I hereby move on behalf of the Democratic Alliance that at its next sitting, this House debates the true status of land reform in South Africa and what could be done to ensure viable solutions to millions of South Africans living with unsecured land rights.
The EFF?
Thank you, Chairperson. I move on behalf of the EFF that this House debates in its next sitting the lack of DECO of having an asset register, thus not knowing how many assets are utilized and those that are left dilapidated in abroad. Thank you.
The ANC?
Honorable Chair, I move on behalf of the African National Congress that in its next sitting, the House debates a healthy and educated working age population is the cornerstone of the sustained and inclusive economic success as it lifts living standards and the dignity of the people. I move. Thank you.
The other two parties are not present. Good is not here. Go. The ANC.
Thank you, Chairperson. On behalf of the African National Congress, I move that the House, in its next 16 debates, the crucial role of the small business and informal sectors in fighting, alleviating, and eradicating poverty, unemployment, and inequality. I so move. Thank you.
ATM.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the ATM, I move that in the next sitting, the House